computer. Okay, we should be recording. All right. Hello, Grant.
Hey, Michael, how's it going?
It's going all right. Thank you for joining today to do this listening comprehension slash discussion about the pandemic. I just want to welcome any people who are listening today to maybe take notes. There will be some questions at the end, so you can listen to our conversation and use this as a listening comprehension exercise. All right, Grant, why don't you just give a very quick introduction of yourself? You know, what your background is, where you live, what you're doing.
Sure. Well, my name is Grant, and I've been teaching for a good 15 years. I've been living in China teaching English for 6 years. I work at a kindergarten, been there for about 5 years, and been also teaching online. So I really enjoy doing what I'm doing. I'm also volunteering on a platform where I engage children in stories and reading together and working together and helping each other out. And that kind of sums me up in a nutshell.
All right, great. So, yeah, I'm also a teacher. I sort of resigned from my teaching position that I'd had for about 8 years, just because I got tired of the focus on standardized testing. Uh, and I've been doing online teaching for the last 3 years. So before that, I also was teaching for 15 to 20 years, originally in Brooklyn and the wider New York area. I would even go up and teach in the Bronx. Um, and so, yeah, that's my background. Today, we will be trying to focus on the pandemic. The pandemic. It's a big topic to talk about. We may go astray a little bit, but we'll try to reel it back in to that. So where you live, Grant, in China, uh,
Mhm.
you know, that's where this presumably originated from, the Wuhan area. Is that anywhere near where you live?
No, it's quite far because I know in Wuhan it was closed off. The city I was in, uh, actually, when it started to panic or that when it started to actually happen, like my brother and I were in Beijing, so I had flown my brother out to China to come visit me. We're going to go to Beijing, do the Great Wall, et cetera, et cetera. And then we did the Great Wall. We had to wear masks and kind of like was hinting at it, but we weren't really sure exactly what was going to happen. And then the next day, basically everything closed down. Not shut down like we can't leave Beijing, but like all the festivities, the tours, the museums, everything.
All the
Restaurants were open.
tourist stuff, yeah.
Yeah, we had a whole plan, and it was, hey, we made it. We made it work. We got food. We got to try lots of food, so it made it work. But like at first I was like, no way, it can't be this bad. And then once it progressed, like we got back to Shenyang, there was talk like whether or not my brother would be able to go back home. And I
Yeah.
was like teasing him. I was like, well, you can always work online. he's like, he's like, yeah, I'll live here. I'll tidy up your house,
Oh
but
my God.
luckily, short and sweet, he got back and he had to be in quarantine for and self quarantine, beginning
Uh-huh.
self quarantine. And then also on top of that, because when he came back, my nephew couldn't go back to his school, and because that was what was in the states, so they had to wait an additional 2 weeks. And then after that happened, then everything started to shut down in the states. Like schools were like,
Yeah,
okay, we may be
we'll
shutting
get to
down.
that in a minute.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
that took a while for that to happen. So I'm talking like early on in the pandemic. So when it first broke out in China, you're saying your brother was there visiting you when the news like first broke in China?
Yes, correct. Yeah,
Okay,
when it first broke.
interesting.
So
And you guys flew to Beijing at that time.
We had
or took
taken
a
a
train?
train to
You took a
Beijing.
train.
Yeah,
Right.
we
Right. So
took a train to
you
Beijing.
traveled to Beijing, and while you were in Beijing, that's when like the proverbial shit hit the fan, so to speak. Yeah.
Exactly, definitely. We did the Great Wall. We got that out of the way. That's what I'm really happy about. He
Okay.
got the
Good.
wall.
All right. You
So,
did the Great Wall. What else did you do before everything was shut
um,
down?
well, actually, the wall is really all we did as far as like an actual tour. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we kind of wandered around. We went to restaurants and stuff. We went to this really nice hot pot area. Was it hot pot? I forget. But it was all really strange to us because during that time we had our phones, right? And they started to put our phones in these Ziploc baggies, and we're
Oh
like,
yeah.
why are they doing that? Oh, I remember we went to this place where they did the noodles. They actually did the whole noodle thing.
Oh
They
yeah. Yeah.
made noodles. So we got a lot of food. So it's kind of
Sure.
boring to hear just food. But we got the main attraction we got was the Great Wall. And
Uh-huh.
then we were just told, like, hey, it's, as you said, it hit the fan and the everything went loose. And
Okay.
luckily
And
enough, we got, yeah, go ahead.
so how long were you around? Were you traveling before you decided we should cancel and go back home?
Well, we didn't technically cancel. We were only in Beijing for a short time. He flew
Uh-huh.
to Shenyang. We he flew, then we went to Beijing the next day. Was it the next day? I'd have to next day or the day after that. But we were only in Beijing for 3 days, so we did stay our 3 days
Okay.
um, because we weren't sure if we'd get a seat going back. All we
Yeah.
know is that we were able to get back. Everything was hunky dory, and we came back, and then again, Shenyang,
Uh-huh.
all the shops were kind of basically shut down. Like there were really no
Oh,
restaurants out.
wow.
We had to
Was this
order food.
around January-ish?
Yes,
December,
yes,
January?
it was
Okay.
like right when the news hit.
Okay.
Then I think it was basically during the spring festival,
Yes,
which
yes.
began.
Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
that was the problem, right? Was that it was a big migration of people. The biggest migration of people for in China was during that
Hmm.
time, and that's
Hmm.
boom, that's when it happened. And there were all of
Yep.
these people in these Southeast Asian countries, uh,
Hmm.
all of these Chinese people who I think, from what I've heard, uh, left China, like they were kind of doing the same thing you were doing, like wherever they go to see family or whatnot, and then they heard this news about, oh, there's this mysterious virus and things might get shut down soon. A bunch of people left China. They went to like Thailand, they came to Indonesia, the Philippines, Vietnam, like they just mass exodus, from China. I have a lot of friends that did that, and have heard from a lot of my students that did that. Um,
Yeah.
Now, when you say you were hearing on the news, about this, is that local China news, or where do you see your
What?
news?
Well, I kind of stay away from news. So I hear from friends of friends, or just hear from people, or WeChat. You look at reading WeChat. Now it's
Got
not like
So
it's not like.
your primary news source, what you're saying, is gossip and social media. Is that what
Well,
you're
it's not
saying?
necessarily gossip, and so but there's links to back it up. Like there'll be a news article that I'll go to and I'll read.
I see. I
And
see. Got it.
so like I have my VPN. It's on YouTube. I'm not afraid to say VPN. Uh, so I can go. I would look it up and just check what things were going on and stuff like that.
Okay.
Some people were telling me that there was a chance that my brother and I thought it was like really they couldn't do that. They couldn't forbid somebody to go home with their passport. Just as if I wanted to go back to the States, I still could. I go to my embassy. I think there's charter flights to go there and stuff like that. There are ways. We're not locked out of going home. And like,
That's not necessarily true, though, Grant,
oh,
is it?
really?
Right? Because I don't know for sure. I haven't heard a story of someone like an American citizen in China who couldn't fly back. But there are stories of tens of thousands of American citizens being stranded in other countries not being able to fly back to the US for who knows what reasons, like maybe flights were canceled, that type of thing.
Mm.
And the US government trying to expatriate people back, like especially in the Middle East. There were lots of people stuck there. Here in the country that I'm at in Indonesia, I couldn't fly back for months if I wanted to, right? Like there's just no flights. So
Okay,
whether
it was just the fact that
whether or
there's no
not the
flight.
US would have accepted me, I don't know. But I do know that there were lots and lots of cruises, right? You must have
Mm.
heard about this on the news, right?
Oh
The
yeah,
cruise ships
definitely.
that were
Yep.
trying to dock in different places and everybody rejected them. Even in Florida and California, they were not letting people off of those boats, right? Even if they
I
were
remember
US
hearing that.
citizens, right?
That's ridiculous.
They were not letting people off of those boats. They let, I heard, one guy off in Florida because the people on the boat were saying, "Look, this guy's so bad that he's gonna die. You've got to let him off." He was an old man, and they did let him off. Only that guy, they let him off. He did end up dying in a hospital in Florida. All the other passengers had to stay on the boat. Um, So there are some US citizens that are at least stuck on boats that weren't able to. I don't know if they still are as we speak, but up to like last month they were. Here's a funny story about
That's
that. There was a group, a tour ship that went off, and it's like a very, very long cruise. It's an around the world cruise that lasts several months, right? So
mhm.
these are like mostly old retired people that, they're going to get on and go for like a 5-month cruise around the world, something ridiculous like that. They
Mhm.
took off right before the pandemic started.
Oh god.
And then they couldn't land anywhere after they had landed. I forget. They went to like Mexico, the Caribbean, and then I think they were on their way maybe to Europe. Anyway, at some point during their travel, that's when the global lockdowns happened, and these people couldn't dock, get off the boat anywhere. So they were literally stuck at sea, for months. They would dock in some different locations, and they would allow them. Some ports would give them supplies, but nobody could get off the boat. Pretty crazy. Imagine that, right?
That is wow. That um,
So
that is
uh, I want to talk a little bit about the lockdowns, if you don't mind, right? So
sure, sure.
this is something that's been very controversial. You see how they did the lockdowns in China. It looked very effective, but it was also an example of a very, very authoritarian government going in and forcing a shutdown on citizens who don't really have the rights and freedoms that people have in other parts of the world. So, like that kind of lockdown is very difficult to impose on other parts of the world. Um, so, I wanted to get your perspective on how it went down in your area. I know you're not in Wuhan, but what
Yeah.
was it like in your city? Where are you in Shuhan? Where
Uh,
is it?
Xinjiang.
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 What did the
Yeah.
lockdowns look like in Xinjiang?
Well, actually, if I define my lockdown like I'm quarantined to my house, can't go anywhere, that wasn't necessarily the case. However, I did hear from people that they weren't allowed because of universities they weren't allowed to leave the dormitory,
Hmm.
only to go out and get food like once a week.
Right.
There were a couple shops open, like limited, like there was like a chow share, a little market just down the street.
So
Um,
mostly
I mean,
everything closed down is what you're saying.
yes. So basically, I mean, as far as shut down, even if it, I mean, there's if stores and stuff are shut down, what do you got to do when you go out?
Exactly.
You can't.
That's what I mean. So it's not
So
like there's a policeman standing at your door like saying you can't leave,
no,
but
no,
but the
absolutely not.
businesses shut down.
Yeah, the businesses were shut down,
Hmm.
and as I do agree, it is a very authoritarian method to use. It was effective,
Right.
and now, you know, whether or not. people do talk, and I didn't really hear negativity, and not just because they're not allowed to be negative, because even though they can be negative, they are negative.
Mm-mm.
That doesn't stop Chinese citizens or myself from saying something. You're not degrading them. You're just saying, "Hey, I don't like this." That doesn't mean you're shaming the government. But
Right.
I didn't really hear much complaining. They just would say, "Hey, yeah, I can only go out every now and then." Now, there was a lot of unfairness in this lockdown where foreigners were being targeted over Chinese citizens, letting Chinese citizens go out and do whatever the heck they want and quarantining the foreigners
Oh, I hadn't heard that.
at
Interesting.
universities.
So if
Yeah,
you were like obviously a white guy, like if you or I or a black guy, like obviously not Asian, if you are out walking down the street, say you went for a run, they might stop
it
you and say like, "Oh, you got to go back home."
not necessarily that way, but not like be allowed to enter a restaurant or enter a
Oh,
bank. I saw a lot of videos on WeChat going around being refused, which I
interesting.
think is utterly ridiculous. I think they're just as likely to get something as we are. Doesn't
Of course,
matter what you look like
of
or your
course. No,
ethnicity.
there's no the virus
You
is not
know,
racist or classist or anything.
exactly, exactly. There is a way to put it. The virus
Um,
isn't.
yeah. So
Um,
did you find it difficult to say buy food or anything like that? Like to go grocery shopping? Did you
um,
experience anything like that?
I really cater to the local market. I didn't
Mm.
really go out and about to buy big groceries. I put on a lot of quarantine weight, if you know what I mean.
So what
But
did you do? Did you stock up on things like or where what is
well,
your
I went out about every week or so
okay,
just to get
yeah.
a couple things to eat, and I ordered food. That's what I
Oh,
basically
you
did.
got
I ordered
takeout a lot, like
takeout a lot. Yeah,
pizza or whatever, the equivalent of
yeah,
that kind of thing.
yeah.
So you are eating a lot of junk food. That's where
Yeah, not
your
very
quarantine weight went
wise
from.
choice. Yeah.
All right.
So, but as far as like, but now that things have, I've this is later, next chapter or whatever. But then now, as we were saying, right at this moment now, and we'll go back to then. But now it seems everything's the norm. Like everything, this half the people aren't even wearing masks.
Half of the
I'm
people
doing it.
now are not wearing masks,
Yeah,
and
like there's
everything's
no
opened up again.
practically it's movie theaters are not open. I'm
Yeah, yeah.
surprised they're not banking off their Chinese movies, because
Okay.
this is the time to actually bank for that's a whole different topic. That's what we're saying.
Yeah.
We don't want to go off too tangent, but but yeah, I don't think movie theaters are open. Malls are open.
Yeah,
Stores
yeah.
are open. Apple Store, whatever, they're all open. Fast food restaurants are open.
So, what do you
Um,
in New York? Did you see the news about New York? Are you aware of how hard New York got hit with this?
it, it seemed to get worse every day. I go on Facebook at night and I'd see like a live feed happening like every night. Like it's like New York mayor speaks again, or New York mayor to talk
Yeah,
about
yeah, yeah,
this,
yeah,
to
yeah.
talk about that.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it,
Well, it was very bad there. I have family and friends. That's where I'm from, and family and friends
mhm,
there confirmed it. Because man, you just don't know. Like I'm not a big conspiracy theorist guy, right? I'll just
mhm.
put that out there. But I also was not really buying uh, what the media was trying to sell us either. Like,
Hysteria.
well, no, I won't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay, maybe there's a bit of hysteria, but I would say the other way. I would what I was not believing was all right. Start back from the beginning. Like, let's roll it back. When this first started, right? We are meant to believe if you want to believe the story that's widely accepted in mainstream media, we are meant to believe that China imposed this very harsh lockdown on a city of what's the population of Wuhan, like 20 or 30 million. It's tens of millions of people, right?
Yeah.
They not only did they impose it on Wuhan, but on the surrounding area because of 100 cases of a strange flu. Come on. Like when would anyone ever lock down their biggest industrial area for like building cars, like shut down their economy over 100 cases, right? So
Mhm.
like right away, I was shocked by the videos that I was seeing online of like, I mean, they shut down their cities. Like, I don't know about in your area, but
Yeah.
they like literally put up barricades around the toll roads. You could not leave the city if you wanted to. And they were arresting people who were fleeing on foot, who were going into neighboring cities and staying in hotels. They were bringing those people back or arresting them and putting them in some sort of quarantine. Like, it was tightly controlled. And this is supposed to be for 100 cases. Like, I don't buy that. I don't buy
Mhm.
that at all. And I don't have any kind of documentation or evidence that shows that the numbers were much higher. I just don't believe it. You know what I mean? So,
Mhm.
um, and there's not a lot of people uh, talking about that. You know, you hear people talking about, oh, the number of deaths is much higher because we see the number of urns. You know, the people that have been cremated, their ashes are put in an urn, and you hear
Yeah.
people talk about in China, oh, there's way more urns than what there should be, or this kind of thing. But I
Mhm.
just think of in the very beginning, why would you lock down an entire region over 100 cases of pneumonia? Uh, there was clearly much more going on to this story uh, from early on than what the media was telling us, I
And
thought.
there's backtracking it even about 2 months before it went media worldwide.
Hmm.
Allegedly, now I can't contest to this other than what I've read, but there were pre-warning cases where I do know there's a person who had warned what was happening, and they didn't want to believe what was happening, and there was that happened. Now again, I can't contest or confirm or can deny or whatever, is all hearsay. But there was some warning that was being alerted, and I do know that China got heat for not communicating. you know Now
Yeah,
I can't
right.
again confirm or deny that the US is just as bad or good as that, because I know in cases, again, there's communication lack in all countries. I think the US is just as bad in other cases that may have happened in the past.
I don't know
We're
about
not.
if I agree with you on health issues. I think the U.S. is a lot more transparent. You can't compare the way that information is disseminated in China to the U.S. Like,
Maybe not about health per se. I'm just saying like communication. Like we'll hide things and we won't say everything until we have to. That I'm talking
maybe,
that kind
maybe,
of
but
thing.
not something on the scale of like a pandemic, Grant. I couldn't. I mean, I can't think of a
Oh, really?
single
Okay.
example. Like okay, things like where the U.S. is going to invade next, or like military tactics and things like that. Like, what are we doing in Afghanistan? Or all this kind of stuff. Sure, yeah, I would agree that information is not widely spread to the U.S. Like how people's tax dollars are spent. You know, like for example, in this pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
of the lots of the
Where
subsidy
did it go?
went. Well, we know that 80% of it went to millionaires, right? We know that we're seeing a lot of corruption in the U.S. Like state senators that were allocated this money are giving the money to the either themselves, channeling it through like companies that they own, or giving it to their rich friends, uh, people that are at the top of the food chain, like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, like these people were getting millions of dollars, uh, while small business owners were getting nothing, or they were getting their one-time stimulus check of $1,200. So
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing. All right, fine. I agree. The American public really doesn't know about, but that's not necessarily because the government is hiding it from them. It's just because mainstream media doesn't report on it very much, because
Mm-hmm.
mainstream media in the US is corporate media, isn't it? And like it's corporations that are the ones that benefit from these kind of tax breaks. The information's
Yeah,
there if you want to look
exactly,
for it.
exactly.
I don't think
Yeah.
the government is intentionally covering up this information that I would argue like China probably is doing, right?
Yeah. Really quickly, Teacher Michael, I want to pause it. My computer warned me my battery is going low. I'm going to pause the video right
Let's
now.
pause. I'll also pause mine. All right. So we'll
Yeah,
take a
so I
quick
can
break,
plug, so I
guys.
can.
We'll be right back in a minute. All right. All right, guys. And we are back. I got a refill on my coffee. Did you get your computer started?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's being rejuvenated.
Good. All right. Let's jump right back in.
um,
We were talking about like information being disseminated or
yeah.
shared.
Well,
Now,
hearing what you said, I guess I can contest and I can agree to you on that because I was just saying I can't imagine that we hadn't hit something. But if I may be wrong, I'm not a I don't know everything. I was just imagining. I wonder if there was ever a case in 100 years, 200 years ago,
oh,
where
absolutely. A
we
hundred
were
percent.
hiding something just as. Again, I don't condone that it was hidden from the world, but
Oh
I'm
man, yeah.
saying,
I mean, historically, yeah. You look back at like what happened in the Vietnam War, for example, like Agent Orange. That you look at like what comes out about like say like for example, Kennedy got killed. You look at there's a book that just came out about Charles Manson and the government using LSD as sort of this Manchurian candidate program to
mhm,
infiltrate the hippie movement in the 60s and 70s. That's crazy. Like I'm not going to go off on that tangent right now because it's a
yeah,
rabbit hole. It's a legit like deep rabbit hole to go down. But the government in the past historically has done some really
questionable
effed
motives.
up, no, like straight up like effed up stuff, like messed up.
Yeah.
Like you look at it, it's like, whoa. And like there's all these whistleblowers that have come out, or over time, things become public record. And there's smart people out there who collect the documentation and put it all together
Hmm.
and piece this narrative together. The problem is the American public is pretty, I think not just American public, I think people in general are very lazy, right? And like they don't see those connections. So if you see something that happened 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, and you see it happened again another decade, and then you take that same type of scenario happening today, like protest for example, and then you hear people talking about these government tactics that maybe are being used, and people saying, no, this is a conspiracy theory, the government would never do that. But like if you go back and read the history, like the government did do that, and like why would they stop doing it now, right? Like we could talk about this
Yeah.
later, but uh
Exactly.
the
The
point.
reason why I was bringing it up is because we were talking about the lack of communication. Now,
Mhm.
I kind of question, maybe this might go a little off tangent and you can stop me if it is, but do you think if they were upfront 2 months before it happened, do you think the US would be in sync with China? Or do
That's
you
a
think
good
we.
question. That's a really good question. So, um, this is what I was talking about, like with my friends in the U.S. So, um, for those of you who don't know that are watching, I don't know if I said this at the beginning of the podcast, but I have lived in Asia for a long time. I went to college in Japan, and I have been living in Indonesia on and off for the better part. Let's say for well over a. I've spent well over a decade of my life living in Southeast Asia. All right. And one thing that I noticed the first time when I went to college in Japan was the widespread use of face masks, right? That's something that as an American, and you could probably contest to this, we don't see a lot
Why?
of that. Unless
No.
it's a doctor in a hospital, you don't see people wearing face masks unless it's an Asian person in the airport. And I'm not trying to be racist, that's just a fact, right? When you are in an airport in the US, you might see a few Asian people wearing masks, and that's it. You never see people out wearing face masks. Like
Yeah,
almost
I agree.
never, never, right? So
Hmm.
now the question is, what back to your question is, so we
Mhm.
know in Asia it's already like standard practice. Like for decades, people have been doing this, right? If you
Mhm.
are sick, uh, like even just a cold, if you've got the sniffles or like they call it the flu, it's not really a flu, but a cold, a common cold.
Mhm.
People will put on a mask so that they're not spreading it around to people at their work or to people at the shops when they go around, right? It's just common practice to do that, right? Now in
Mhm.
the US, people do not do that at all. So uh, I think in a lot of Asian countries, it worked very well when the government said, look, here are the numbers, this is what's happening. And the people just put on face masks and chose to kind of scale back their social uh,
Consistency.
activity. Now in the US, what we see is it took a long time for the government to do anything. They were saying it's a hoax, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Finally, the numbers are coming in. I mean, we could argue about what an awful President Trump is, but what this has never happened in the history of modern history anyway. We could say the
Ye-
Spanish flu in the okay, maybe, but
Yeah.
in the internet age when we've got access to fast information like this, nothing
Mhm.
like this has ever happened, right? So
Yeah.
um there's no reason why governments shouldn't have gotten their collective shit together a lot faster, right? um
Yeah.
and Europe did a pretty good job, I would say. And I didn't hear a lot of people in Europe complaining about being locked down or wearing masks. In the U.S., however, you had people out protesting, stop the
Because
blockade,
they couldn't
stop
get
the
a haircut.
lockdown. Yeah, and look, I get it. I get their anger at the economic thing. Like, look, you can't not allow me to go to work, right? Like if I'm a barber, or let's not even be hypothetical. I am a teacher, right? You are a teacher. Many teachers in the US right now got furloughed, right? Some of them, if you're lucky, you got to work from home and do what we're doing right now, which is teach your students online. But many of them got laid off. I mean, imagine if you're a PE teacher right now. What are you doing? A whole lot of nothing. Like it's not like, okay, let's meet online and do exercises, guys. Like I doubt there's much of that going on. You know what I
That's a
mean?
good question, actually. You're right. Like
So
the elective teachers, art
yeah,
class. Well, actually,
music teachers, art teachers, like in public school anyway, they've all been furloughed. Like there may be some private schools that are just not firing all their teachers, but
mhm.
dude, worldwide, many teachers are being let go, and the salary of teachers going down. Like I've heard just about from everybody that I know, they're taking like 20-30% pay cuts
What?
around the world at
Goodness
like
gracious.
prestigious international schools, right?
That's
So
unbelievable.
yeah, and those are the ones that they really need, like an English teacher, a Chinese teacher, a math, science, IT,
Mhm.
business teachers, the stuff that needs to be taught for standardized testing, right? But
Mhm.
PE
Mhm.
teachers, music teachers, art teachers, they're done. Those guys are just stuck
They're
at home. So there's that, all right. But then also, I mean, everybody else, if you even if you're like a pizza shop owner or a haircut shop guy or a record store owner, whatever, that got shut down and you can't go to work now. I get it. Like 3 months out of work, that's a big problem.
it's
But
yeah.
instead of arguing about, don't lock us down, this is what I don't get about Americans. It brings us back to the thing I was talking about before. Why aren't they protesting the government to give them some of that subsidy money, right? Like the US gave everybody a one-time $1,200 stimulus check, right? So like if you're an
Mhm.
American, you could have got a $1,200 stimulus check. Even though you're living in China, you still could have got that. Every American was accepted to get that, regardless of where they live, regardless of whether or not it was like no questions asked. Everybody gets this. But $1,200 isn't a big help if you're out of work for 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
And the
Especially
government
exactly.
gave $4 trillion. 4 trillion. $4 trillion. 80% of that money went to millionaires. And look, we're talking all kinds of shit on this podcast, like stuff like that I'm saying. I've got all the links here. I'm going to share this in the comments section. All right. So you guys can go and you can confirm most of the stuff. Like, this is real. Like, the government really did give 80% of that $4 trillion to rich people, right?
Was it so
Um,
they could pay the employees, or was it just?
well, that's their argument, but
Uh,
I can give you just one example of that, right? Like, so here's the counter argument for that, right? So the argument for doing it was, yes, we need to pay. It's the Reagan era trickle down economic theory, right? You keep the rich people with their money flowing in, and they're going to buy more stuff. They're going to pay their employees, and that money is going to trickle down, right? But what we have seen is, over the last few decades, the money is being sucked out of the lower classes up into the billionaire class, right? In the last, since the pandemic, well, not since the pandemic, but since the lockdowns began in the US, so just for like the last 2 or 3 months, the billionaires have made over $500 billion, right?
hmm. Wow.
So think about this. It's the same thing that happened during the recession. You remember the recession? When was it? Like 2008, right? The big recession when Wall Street tanked, right?
Yeah, I
It was
remember
all the
that.
subprime mortgage thing happening, right? The banks were loaning money to people who couldn't afford to buy houses, right? And then they would
Hmm.
foreclose on their houses, and then the banks would sell that to another bank. They'd make the money back, right?
Hmm.
So that was happening on a large scale to minority populations primarily. And then the bank, so it was a predatory lending thing, and it was done on a large scale. It tanked the economy because so many people went bankrupt. And then the government bailed out the banks, right? Do you remember this? They gave $8 trillion to bail out, like, what were the banks? Lehman Brothers, I don't know, all the big banks. I don't remember their names. You could
Okay.
go
Okay.
and look this up, right? This is like well documented history that happened here, but the government did not bail out the people that needed it, right? This is the same sort of mentality that's happening again now in a pandemic. It's like, look, let's forcibly shut everything down, but now we're going to give a bunch of money to the rich people. We're going to give a one-time stimulus package of $1,200 to everybody else, which, in my opinion, was kind of just like hush money. You know what I mean by hush money? Like
Hmm.
just enough money to, like, just keep your mouth shut about what's we're really
Hmm.
doing here, right? Like, just la la la, don't worry about it. All this money we're throwing to
Hmm.
rich people. Take your $1,200 and shut up. Uh, that's what it is. And so what do these people do? Well, that amount of money that they need to pay their employees, or that they got, say they got, like, 500 million. Some of these people are getting like hundreds of millions of dollars. That is something like 0.01% of their net value, right? So somebody like Jeff Bezos, who's got, I don't know how many $billion does he have, like something like 500-600 billion dollars. Like, he's on track to be the world's first ever trillionaire. um, a
Wow.
guy like that, like, if you give him a few $100 million, that's nothing. That's like the same amount of money as, like, me, or the percentage of our income. It's like the same amount as, like, you or I going and buying a cup of coffee, right? Like, he
Yeah.
doesn't need that money. He can afford to pay his employees at Amazon, right?
Yeah.
Who really needed that money were the businesses that got shut down, the small pizza shops, the small coffee shops, the haircut guy, right?
Hmm.
Those are the people who are all unemployed right now, who are draining the system by having to get unemployment, right? Now,
Mhm.
what did all of those rich people do with that stimulus money? What did they do, do you think? Do you think they paid their employees?
Oh, one would hope.
Yeah,
One would
you'd
hope
hope.
they did.
Some of them
But
probably did. Some of them probably did, you know.
but I'm
We
assuming
we
the
know for
consensus.
sure that the airlines did not. The airlines got 500 million in uh, subsidies in
Mhm.
to do exactly that, to pay their employees.
And they
They
didn't
furloughed
oblige.
most of them. They furloughed most of them. And if you're not familiar with the
That's
term furlough, that means you're not technically fired, but we're not going to pay you and we're closed down. So, like, when we open up again, we'll welcome you back and pay you again. But right now, you're not getting a paycheck. That's what furlough means, right? So that's
yeah.
a bit of vocabulary for you guys. If you don't know that word furlough, uh, that'll be one of the vocabulary questions for sure. So what did they do with that money, do you think? Even the guys who were kind enough, let's say like Elon Musk, for example, he was one of the guys who was like, I'm keeping my place open. I'm going to pay all my people. The government forced him to shut down for a little while. And he was like, look, if you force me to shut down in California, I'm going to move to Texas or Florida. And he just stayed open. He was like, I don't give a fuck. I'm staying open. You can arrest me if you want. And he just didn't really close down. He kept paying his employees. He got a stimulus package too. So he's one of the rare cases of a, I guess, responsible big business owner, right? But even him, what do you think all of the ultra rich did? Not only now during this pandemic, but during the recession. What do they do that people like you and I can't
invest
do?
and save, maybe.
Exactly. Not save. They buy things up for pennies on the dollar. So this in a recession, the stock market tanks, right? So normal
So the
people like
billionaires
you or
come back.
me or our parents who have their 401k plan invested in the stock market, normal people like that lose their life savings in their investments. And then these ultra rich millionaires and billionaires go and buy up the stocks for pennies on the dollar, and then the stock market goes up again. So all those things that they bought for pennies on the dollar, the more they buy, the price goes up. And now they've just made billions of dollars almost overnight. So they got stimulus packages from the government and they bought up things for pennies on the dollar. I'm talking properties as well as stocks, right? Jeff Bezos bought 2 apartments in New York that are 4 floors high, penthouse apartments. One of
Jeez.
them cost $25 million, and he paid cash for it. That's just nothing to him, right?
Uh,
Meanwhile, there are people living all over the US. I think the last time I checked, there were 50 million people in the US who were filing for uh, workers, or what do you call it? Unemployment. They were filing for unemployment.
I heard the percentage has gone up quite high. I don't know the exact number. And forgive me if I'm wrong or way off, but it, is it 20% now, or is it like I swear like
I'm
it was
not
very
sure. That's
high.
not, that doesn't sound off though. I could Google it real quick. Like the unemployment rate in the US now. Is that what you want to know?
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
I for
Let's
some
ask
I'm thinking
Siri.
it's so high. It can't be that high.
I bet it is because it was around 5% before. Unemployment rate in US now. All right. 24%. That's according to
What
current unemployment rate statistics. Yeah,
1/4 of the population of the U.S. who's working
yeah,
is wow. That's
yeah. And that's the other scary thing is that word that you said, that is working. So this number of 24% are unemployed. I don't think that even includes like homeless people or people that uh, don't uh, claim unemployment benefits, right? That's just working age
people who are
people.
claiming unemployment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So that's ridiculous, right? That means only 75% of people who are working right now have been able to keep their jobs running.
their job, or they have some kind of form of payment coming in. And
Hmm.
as you said, statistically speaking, is that we don't know out of those 75% people if whether or not they're getting their full salary, they're getting doctor's salary, they're getting a partial of their salary.
Right.
You don't know that. So,
Or if
but
they're
wow.
people like my dad, he just retired recently, and he was a doctor, so he didn't have like a pension plan built in, like a company. He had to save his own retirement fund, right? And
Hmm.
he did that by investing a lot in stocks. Now he's very smart and on top of things. So when the economy started tanking, I mean, when we say economy tanking, what they mean, the government, what they're talking about is the stock market, right? So like technically right now, they're saying the economy in the US is very good. But like, how is the economy good if 24% of people are out of work, right? So,
Yeah.
but it also affected people like my dad who are not unemployed, but they've already retired, and then their stocks started going down. There were probably a lot of old people who aren't very smart about this kind of thing and lost everything. My dad luckily was a really smart guy, and he started shuffling things around and doing exactly what we were talking about, like selling off things that were going down and then buying up things that were tanked, and then made more money at the end. So I think he did very well, I think, during this pandemic, but a lot of old people won't have done well. uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, that's a really scary thing, and just another example of like why the government should be helping poor people instead of helping the rich. It,
Hmm.
you must have heard this before. In the U.S., like Bernie Sanders running for president, and all the people coming out saying, "Oh no, not socialism. We'll become like Cuba or Venezuela," right?
Hmm.
When talking about like free healthcare and free education and stuff, right?
Hmm.
You've heard that argument, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But then he ended up dropping out, and now we had
No,
Biden.
he's dropped out. But I
Oh,
mean, just the point
yeah,
about
yeah.
that term, like socialism, right? So, which is what we need. What the U.S. needs right now is a bit of socialism for the poor. Because right now, let's face it, like all these people who are arguing that capitalism is the way to go, like it doesn't really work, right? Like we are we are socializing capitalism, right? When
Hmm.
we constantly give these subsidies. So it's like socialism for the rich, capitalism for the rest of us, right? So it's like if you or my small business goes out of business because of this, it's like, oh, that's the rules of capitalism, right? If you're not strong enough, you go broke. But like those rules are not applied to the big banks or Wall Street or
Hmm.
giant corporations, right? That are quote unquote too big to fail.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Uh, I don't really know. Like, it just seems like with everything happening that it can go any way, or it just can just be so it's just a catastrophe right now.
How do they
Like,
deal with it in China? Does the government subsidize people who are not able to work, or do they
um,
not make them pay
actually,
rent, or
that's a
what's the
good
deal?
question. I do know that when nobody was working, it wasn't a lot, but the government mandated shops, people who were actually hired, that they would get paid 30%, no, sorry, set 30% of the minimum, no, 70% of the minimum wage in the
Wage,
city.
which is probably
Um,
very low in China, but
Very low, yeah.
at least it's something.
At
I
least
mean,
it's something,
yeah.
yeah. Um, for a lot of schools, a lot of foreigners had the what's the word? Uh,
Student
a
loan
lot of foreigners
programs.
had to just tough it up and had to do the
Oh,
same thing. So a
Oh.
lot of teachers at schools were actually getting paid just as the Chinese were, 30%
Oh.
of the minimum wage or
They
70% of
were
the minimum
cut 30%. Well,
wage.
that's what I said before. Like that's standard around the world. Like teachers are getting their new salaries are 20 to 30% less.
Yeah,
That's
so
all over the world.
but at least, well, and they actually, well, and the fine line is, I mean, there's legalities and stuff that there's two options that teachers could do in China. We're being told, again, this is hearsay by people who are law knowledgeable, but I didn't see documentation to back it up.
Uh-huh.
But if you were working, for example, if you worked at a kindergarten or worked at an elementary school, and let's say you weren't working, you'd be mandated to receive 30% or 70 for now I can't remember if it's 30 or 70 of the minimum wage. But once they ask you to do any kind of work, therefore you will you will be um, rewarded your full salary. You should be given your full salary or negotiate it with your school. So the moment they decide to say, "Hey, Teacher Michael, we need you to teach one class a day, only
Uh-huh.
one, not eight,"
Yeah.
you still will be entitled. That's what I was looking for. Entitled to get the full salary. So if your salary was 15,000 and you weren't working 1 month, you would get 70% of that the minimum wage. Sorry,
Oh, I see.
minimum wage salary. But let's say the next month they want you to do a class every single day. You'd be
You get
entitled
full
to
salary
your
back.
full salary. Allegedly, I don't know if it's a true fact or not, but that's what I was hearing a lot about. Or negotiate it with your school.
Yeah, yeah,
A
yeah,
friend
yeah.
of
I'm
mine.
sure there's a lot of that going on, like favoritism being played, you know.
Yeah. So
Even within one school, I've heard of say like broadly like teachers' salary are being cut 30%, but then some teachers aren't. You know, like some of the favorites. Like I won't
perhaps.
mention what school or who or what, but I heard of an IT teacher who is being not only his salary was not cut, but they actually gave him a little bit of a bump in salary uh,
Good
because
for him.
yeah, well, it was a situation where uh, you know what a lot of schools were doing was saying like, look, we don't know what's going to happen. We need to scale back. We don't know how long this is going to happen. We're going to pay you your salary for the rest of this school year now, but starting next year, right? We're going to make some cuts. And so people were asking like, well, how much will the cuts be, right? And a lot of schools were like, well, we don't know yet, but please go ahead and sign. And people were like, what? I'm not signing a contract with a question mark about my salary. And so then they were like, okay, look, it's 30%. And then I think a lot of expats, Western expats, were like, no, I'm not going to do that. You know, I don't agree to that. I'm going to leave. And I'm considering this like a breach of contract, right? Because like if you're in the middle of say like a 3-year contract, you
Hmm.
know, and you leave, a lot of schools will fine you. Like you, okay, you don't
Hmm.
get your bonus, or you don't get your flight home
Yeah.
allowance, or your last
Yeah.
month's pay, or some schools will even like fine you like $5,000 or so, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
So the Western teachers were saying, look, I want my pay for the rest of this school year, and I'm leaving. This is breach of contract. And so some schools were like, okay, bye, you know. But then they're like, well, wait a minute, we really need this guy or this girl, you know.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Let's keep her or him. So that was the case of at least one friend that I know, but
And
not many. That's rare.
I was gonna say, like, now, as you said, when this pandemic happened, or when it was the first wave of, hey, what's that? What's that song? Should I stay or should I
Yeah,
go?
yeah. The
That's
Kinks. Dun, 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 dun,
there
dun,
you go.
dun, dun, dun.
I know songs. I am horrible to artists. It's a whole topic, another topic. Anyways, the line was, should I stay? Should I go? The majority of foreign native teachers went. They went.
Oh,
They
wow.
left.
Okay.
Like, I don't know how it is in Indonesia. I don't know what the percentage of foreign teachers left in Indonesia. You know, I know you do a lot of independent stuff you do online. So you're kind of fortunate that you can go anywhere and you can keep your students as long as you pretty much want.
For
But
for me, yeah, being an online teacher is a bit different. So like, I mean, if anything, I experienced a big boom initially. Like
exactly,
I had more work than I could deal with, you know what I
keep up
mean?
with.
And I
Hmm.
had people who were like finding, I guess because I don't make like a strange username. So like my username for like Facebook and web talk and WeChat and YouTube, it's all just my name, right? So
Hmm.
some people were like stalking me online, and I'm getting like bing, like yeah, Mr. Michael, can you please teach me, or can you teach my friend or my kid or whatever, from like random people that I didn't even know, you know, or like hey, Mr. Michael, I was in your class, or my kid is in your class in Chengdu that you teach online, and I have a friend. Can you teach it? So I'm getting like all these messages, and I was teaching initially there in the beginning, like morning to night, you know, and I was also
Hmm.
doing these broadcast classes through
Hmm.
Ding Talk that we
I
were
remember
able
that.
to monetize, and I got like some of those classes had like 300,000 viewers, like live viewers.
Wow,
So on a few of those, I made out like very well, you know. And it was a free class for the student, but I got paid. I got paid for that, man. That was
nice.
good money. Um, so you know, and that was one of the things that I tried to do as well, was to then give something back, you know, like so I was offering some free classes to people as well, you know, and that was when I joined up with Web Talk. I started doing those free classes.
Yeah.
Um,
Uh,
so yeah,
let's see.
it
Kind of.
impacted online teaching benefited from that, right?
Yeah, I don't want to get dinged for this, but it's kind of in another light, a blessing in disguise for
Yeah,
online teaching. It's a
absolutely.
blessing in disguise, and what I mean by that is, yes, it's a horrible thing that's happened, etc. But what I mean by blessing in disguise, if I may just elaborate, is that it's showing how we can what we can do online rather than offline.
Yeah,
Even though, everything now we've figured out, whatever it is we do offline now, we've figured out we can actually save money and do things online, whether it be teaching, whether it be an art class, maybe even an art class. You can do things digitally, whether it be um, other things as well. It looks like it does seem to cater toward the teaching and education side of online. But I mean, if you're running a market, if you're running a store market, they don't have to go inside to buy shoes. They can order things. Now, do they have to get them fitted? Yes, you do returns. There might be other factors that we dwindle down to, like the pros and cons.
yeah,
But now we're realizing that now we're 6 months in this pandemic, and now, as you said, the U.S. got a late start. Probably officially started to lock down things in March. Forgive me if I'm incorrect in my
yeah. That sounds
timeline.
about right. March,
Okay.
April, yeah.
When the
Some of them were
real,
later. Florida
yeah,
and Arizona and Texas were a bit later, but yeah, they
yeah.
started around March, I believe.
So when the nitty gritty got into gear, now it's like, now it's, hey, can this business work? A shoe business or a haircut business. Now in a technicality, can a barber cut hair at their home in their garage?
No, no, of course
Maybe.
not. Look, I get what you're saying. Like, there's a lot of
Yeah.
things that can be done online, and we know. I mean, Amazon has been proof of that. That like online shopping is the future, and China has taken that model and run with it with Alibaba and
Mm-hmm.
what Tokopedia or whatever other things. Um, and there's as you said, pros and cons to that decimates some local economies, right? So there's like the idea of like small businesses in small towns, like in
Mm-hmm.
small town America, like there are entire malls that are just like a ghost town now, right? Why?
Yeah.
Because of online shopping, right? So it decimated the local economy, but that's the future. So, you know, you listen to people like one of the guys who was running for president, Andrew Young. He talked a lot about this, about how we need to prepare for this future of automation. You know, like the next big thing, that first it was the retail industry that got hit by online shopping, right? And so there's all these people out of work that are unskilled workers. Like, I mean, all they have experience with is, like, you know, charging you money for buying a record or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
you know, shoes or clothes or whatever. And
Exactly.
now they
Retail.
can't work anywhere because where they live, there's no shops anymore, right? There's no malls. And and the next big wave that's coming is the automated trucks. So the trucking industry is going to be hit next, right? Because of, again, Amazon, they've already got their fleet of trucks that drive themselves. They're testing them
Oh,
on
really?
US roads
Oh my
already. They've already
God.
got them driving between Texas and California already.
That's crazy.
9 of them in a row. I think it's 9. They lock up and they just get very close to each other, so they're drafting. So it saves gas because they're so close to each other, and they all are operating on like a hive mind. You know, so like if the front one stops, they all stop together. You know, and they've only got one driver in the lead car who just sort of sits there and watches to make sure that it's okay. These are already on U.S. highways as we speak.
That's really
Yeah, and
interesting.
this is
Yeah.
going to put out of business an estimated like 500 million truckers. I did not realize this, but trucking is a huge employer in the US. Like there are many 500 million people in the US drive trucks. This is a good job for people who don't have a college education to
Mhm.
get paid pretty well. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
they can get Bay Pink. Yeah.
not a great life. You're on the road all the time and living out of hotels or
Yeah.
sleeping in the back of your truck, but you can earn a much better salary than being a cashier at a grocery store or something stupid like that. Sorry, if you're a grocery store cashier, it's not stupid. I appreciate you, but you know what I mean. Like it's a much higher salary than that.
Yeah.
That's the next big thing that's coming, uh, and there needs to be a way to deal with that.
So I was gonna mention about kind of as we're going along the lines of this topic about
Yeah,
the COVID and stuff. And so it seems like there's a, and I maybe this is the wrong word to use, but there is a huge hysteria. Like I'm afraid to cough or sneeze,
yeah.
you know, in fear of
You might
them
get punched
thinking,
in the face. Yeah,
like, but the littlest thing, which is so common, we have common colds, we
yeah,
have our typical flu.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, I don't get sick. I don't. The
Mhm.
last time that I had a fever that the school sent me home was 4 years ago. It was 4 years ago. I
Yeah.
felt hot. The nurse took my temperature and said, "Yeah, you can go home if you want." I go, "Okay." They wrote a message to the parents, and
So what's up with this? Sorry to interrupt, but what is this deal with the temperature? Like, when are we going to call bullshit on this? Like, because something like I forget what the percentage is, but there's a very high percentage of people who have tested positive for COVID, coronavirus, SARS, whatever you want to call it, this new pandemic virus, that don't have any symptoms. They're asymptomatic, which means you will not have a temperature,
temperature.
but
You won't be
you can
vomiting.
spread it. You can still spread it.
That
So
doesn't
what
make
is
any
this
sense.
nonsense with the temperature everywhere that we're doing? Why are we doing this still? They're doing it
Because
everywhere.
they say that they say, not I say, they say that if you have a fever, or fever is one of the symptoms
Yeah,
of COVID.
yeah,
Fever, aches, pains,
yeah, of course.
maybe
That's one
vomiting.
one of the symptoms. You're right.
Yeah,
That's one
You
of
know,
the symptoms.
but here's the thing though. Here's the $1,000,000 question: is what is considered a fever?
Oh, it's
You
over a
know?
37.5. That's pretty universal. If you're over 37.5, most businesses will not let you in.
Oh, really?
That's
Okay,
the
well,
that's the
fair
standard.
enough.
Yeah.
Because I
And if
do
it's
know
if
that.
it's over like 38 or 39, like anyway, at the mall that I'm at right now, where I live in this big super block. So I'm like on
Mhm.
a 30 floors up, and I can walk downstairs and there's shops everywhere, and I can walk across the street and there's like a giant mall over there. It's actually three malls that grew together and became
Cool.
one like Uber mall. And there's like
Yeah.
apartments all around me, swimming pools and gyms and stuff. So I don't have to drive anywhere to go do my day-to-day shopping or whatnot. Um, when I enter the mall over there, the first thing they do is make you walk through like a mister that mists you with disinfectant, and then they take your temperature. And they either do it like this, or actually, when you enter the mall, it's a big screen.
It's
You
a
go and
thermal, right?
stand
Your
in front. Yeah,
thermal.
it's a big thermal screen, and the guy will tell you to go ahead and go through. And then every shop that you enter, after you've already gone through that process,
You
every
take your
shop
temperature
will have the
again.
little temperature thing, and they'll mist your hands.
Yeah.
You know, they're doing that. Um, Funny story about that. I bought a coffee, uh, and I was carrying my coffee. I got it outside at Starbucks,
Oh, they took
outside
your
the mall.
hand.
And I walked into the mall. I went through the mister, stood in front of the thermal thing, and a fucking alarm went off, dude. Like it wasn't even like like there was a little police siren light went off,
Oh
and the
my
guard,
God.
what's going on? And I was like, oh, it's my coffee is too hot. It's a hot coffee. And he was all confused. I was like, look, just let me put my coffee over here and then I'll do it again. And he was like, oh, what do I do? What? Like it was, you could tell it was the first
Oh
time
my
anybody
God.
had, cause it was like something stupid, like 55 or so, like it was like inhumanly possible to have a temperature that high. And like he runs over and like other security come around and they're all like talking, what should we do? What should we do? And so I just am like, "Ugh," look, I walk over and I put my coffee down and these guys are like jumping back away from me. I put my coffee on the guy's desk and then I go and stand back in front of the thing and I'm like, guys,
Look, I'm fine.
look, here I am. And then they look at it and then a bit of talking again. Uh, and
I'm
then,
like, oh, okay, go
oh,
ahead.
okay, the coffee. Yeah. And they all have a good laugh about it and let me through. Um,
This is a whole nother rant. It just come on, people. Use your
yeah,
common sense.
yeah. But the
And,
point is like the temperature, I get it. Like we need to do something, right? We need to do something. But I think like if everybody's wearing a mask, that's about all you can do. Like, what else can you really do? I mean, we can't just stay shut down forever. Like, that's not an option.
no, that's never gonna happen.
I would argue that we didn't or don't need to be locked down as much as we do now. Like,
Yeah, I
I think
agree.
we should open up movie theaters again, but just one or two seats behind everybody, every other row, so nobody's sitting like directly behind you to sneeze on the back of your head. Like every other row is empty and then every other
Yeah,
seat is empty. Let them run at
yeah.
50% capacity. I get it. That's not ideal for their business that
But
they would normally
but
be
the thing
taxed.
is that they'll still get profit off it. I
Better than
mean,
being
they're
shut down
the,
for 4 months,
the
5 months.
tickets
Like,
are 15, $20 or whatever it is. Or I mean, I know in the Eastern countries it's not as much.
oh,
I don't
here it's
know how.
super cheap. Here you can
Yes,
see a movie. One person to see a movie is, what is it? It's about $1, $2
really.
for
It's about what it
IMAX,
is in China.
for super nice IMAX
Yeah,
theater where they like you have to choose the seat that you're gonna sit in.
yeah.
Craziness.
I have my own app that I go to that
Oh yeah, they have that here too.
I learned what English movie was in Chinese. Just I just have the characters memorized in my head.
Oh,
I
you
don't
don't
read
speak
any Chinese.
Chinese? You don't
Of
read or
course
speak
I don't.
Chinese?
我不说中文.
Oh my God, I know how to say ni hao, but I don't live in China.
Yeah. What language they speak in Indonesia? Is it what do they speak in
Indonesian,
Indonesia? Oh,
Indonesian. They call it
Indonesian.
Bahasa. Okay, so that's an. We could go off on a little tangent. Mostly, yeah. For the short answer, is Bahasa Indonesia, but every island has slightly different. So, like,
Okay.
I live on Java, and there's Javanese is a language, but
I've heard
in
that. Japanese,
Bali, Balinese is a little bit different.
Balinese.
Yeah, every island's got a
You
different name.
speak all the languages in Indonesia?
No, there would be thousands of them. That's
Oh,
why they made Indonesian language, which is basically Malaysian. So like
okay.
I speak Indonesian language, and if I go to Singapore or Malaysia, I can talk to the local people there, and they understand me. Like it's like very polite Indonesian. So
Oh, very nice.
it's a useful language to know. And it's one of the
Uh,
easier, like I speak Japanese as well and had to learn all the writing and all that, and that's very complicated. And
yeah.
I can still understand some Chinese if I see the writing. I don't know how to say
Hmm.
it, but like I know what it
Hmm.
means. Like, you know, like if I'm looking at a
Ah.
Chinese menu, like I can tell, oh, that's pork or that's beef or that's because it's the
Hmm.
same character in Japanese. So that's very useful to me.
Yeah.
But
Um,
how long have you lived in China?
well, I've lived in July 25th. I looked at I was looking when my anniversary of China was coming up. I think
So
it's the
almost a year.
25th. Yeah, almost a
Oh, okay.
year.
Yeah,
I'm coming up
you
on
won't
my
learn Chinese
anniversary.
in a year.
No,
It
no,
takes
but I've been in China for 6 years though.
Jesus, and you can't speak the language
But
yet?
okay,
Why
but
not?
I'll give a short spiel about this. You know, I came here to teach English. I didn't
Yeah,
come here to study. I didn't come here to do business. I didn't come here to be a diplomat. I came here to teach English.
I got it. But
Now,
like just your day-to-day
but
life though, it must be so difficult when
uh,
you want just like
not
you said, like
really.
buying a movie ticket, you have to memorize what does the character
It
mean
was
for
actually very
English
simple.
movie.
Now, do I not speak any Chinese absolutely at all? Like, I'll speak a little bit and I can understand a little bit. So, I guess you can say I understand enough to get by. But
Okay,
if you were to introduce me to somebody who's single and only speaks Chinese and she wants to talk to me in
that
Chinese, and you
wouldn't
go,
go
"Here's your
very far.
chance, Grant," uh, you get ni hao and ni
So can you
you're
at least like ask for directions? Like if you're lost on the street or you get in a taxi, can you
I
tell
can
them your directions?
understand
Or are you one of
directions.
these
I can
guys who like has your address written down on a piece of paper and shows it to the taxi driver?
Well, no, actually, I have a notepad with Chinese addresses that I put in the Didi, and
And you
Didi
just
does it
show
for
them?
me. If I want to, I always get left and right confused, but I know straight is either Zhao, or I'll just use my hand movements, and they'll
Yeah,
understand my
body
hand.
language. Yeah, yeah. So your Chinese sucks,
Or
is what you're saying. You've been there 6 years and you have
basically, yes.
shit for
But I
Chinese.
don't care. People have been in China for 15 years and don't speak the
No, I
language. I
get
mean,
it. There's people when I lived in Japan who had been there for 10 years, people here in Indonesia that have been here for a long time. But it's
yeah.
just
So
like,
I mean,
I don't get it. Like, for me, I have a totally different perspective. I,
well, you went to Japan to study, so you must learn Chinese, Japanese. You went
this
to
is true. This is
college,
true. But I also
so
had an interest in learning languages before I went there. And I was already studying Japanese. And
hmm,
that's why I got a scholarship to go to Japan. So,
exactly.
that opened up the doorway. But like even if I travel to like I don't speak much Spanish, but I used to travel to Mexico a lot. I
Hmm.
tried to learn Spanish. Like I can speak like enough Spanish to ask directions and chat with, like you're saying, like if I
¿Dónde
met a girl,
estás?
like I could
Biblioteca.
chat up a girl in Spanish, you know what I mean? Like, and I never even lived there really,
Yeah.
I find it
Um.
interesting to be able to communicate to people in their language. See, this is another American thing, right, Grant? Like you're an example of this. Americans, and sorry to call you out on it,
Well, you're probably right.
but Americans have this mentality of like, why don't you speak English, everywhere they go, right?
Well, I'll say
Which is
this
funny
about that.
to me.
I'll say this about that. If you work at an English restaurant, you should speak English,
What is an
right?
English
I work
restaurant?
at.
What is an English restaurant, Grant?
Oh, that's a good question.
The fuck is
If
that?
I guess McDonald's. Okay, for example, if I'm in China and I go to if I go to McDonald's in China, I should be able to speak Chinese to them. not English,
Of course you
because
should.
McDonald's is
Those
in
people
China.
probably didn't even graduate high school. You think they're going to
Yeah,
be able to speak English,
but to be
right?
honest, sometimes they speak better English than my Chinese English
Yeah,
teachers.
right.
But
Yeah,
that's a
it
whole other
shocks
kind
you
of rant.
sometimes. Yeah,
I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, right? Haven't
yeah,
you
yeah, yeah,
worked with second English instructors where their second language is English and they don't know how to help you in your class?
yeah,
Yet
yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
go to your McDonald's or the movie theater and they say, "How many tickets would you like? Would you
Yeah,
like
yeah.
anything that
Some of them
and
have
you're
very
trying,
good English.
yeah,
Starbucks
and I'm
is a
like,
good example of that.
very good example. Yes.
I think it's a
I
culture at Starbucks, like outside of the US, where people go to Starbucks because they want to speak English and their staff all speak very good English. Like every Starbucks that I've been outside of the US, I'm always shocked because they will start directly speaking English to me.
yeah.
And sometimes I fuck with them, and I'm like, how do you know I'm not Spanish or like Russian or why do you just assume that I speak English, uh,
Yeah.
and I'll try to speak with them, in their local language, and they're always
Yeah.
kind of shocked. Oh,
I tip my hat to them.
Spanish,
I really do. I
whatever.
tip my hat for their dedication and their desire to want to speak English to you.
Yeah,
I tip my hat to them. I commend them.
yeah,
I have an app that gets me by. Now, am I? Now, I'll admit, if I could go back before coming to China, I was under this impression of, oh, they'll teach me Chinese. That's what they get you, where they get you. We'll teach you
uh,
Chinese. That never happened.
how were
So
they
I
meant
kind
to
of,
teach you Chinese, like some classes, or
well,
they were
you'd
going to
have
pair
Chinese
you,
classes. That was the whole sales pitch.
and they just
You
never
come
offered
kind
that to you?
Yeah, it never happened.
Wow.
So I'm like, okay, I'll learn it there. If I could kind of go back, yes, I probably would have I would probably would have studied for a few months before moving there.
Yeah, yeah,
But now that I've kind of adapted myself fairly well,
yeah,
I feel pretty good. Now, again, this is kind of going tangent off, and they can listen or not. But going to Vietnam, right?
yeah.
Now, going to Vietnam, if that's something I plan to do year to date, like next year,
Uh-huh.
pending
Right.
nothing's shut down,
You gonna try to
I
learn
do want
Vietnamese?
to make the effort to at least get by, not to be fluent, but to
Yeah,
get
yeah.
by, to
Good.
understand,
Yeah, you
to
should.
communicate
And
basic.
uh, and Vietnamese will be another similar thing to Chinese, where you've got the written language to uh,
Yeah.
as an
Um,
extra added obstacle.
Yeah. Well, I'm not necessarily see my main objective with learning another language is
Speaking.
understand it
Yeah,
first.
yeah,
Understand. If
yeah,
I can understand what they want me to do, then words don't need to be spoken. If they
yeah,
say, okay, blah, 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 I can just do it. I can give a thumbs up, smile, and go, okay. Okay is very worldwide, right?
yeah, yeah. But that's
It depends on what the kind of conversation is. If it's what do I need to do, and they can explain to me what I need to do, then I'm good. If they're going to ask me questions, that's when I need to know some basic dialogue.
it
You
just
know,
limits you so much. Like, I mean, language is just such a powerful tool, and as a language teacher, like, you've got to appreciate that, right? Like, the way that you empower students by teaching them how to speak English, like the doors that's going to open up to them in their lives. And the same thing is in reverse. Like, no matter where you live in the world, if you make an effort to learn that language, even if you don't speak it very well, that opens up so many doors for you, right? Because
hmm
the local people really, really appreciate it. Even if your Chinese or your Vietnamese is garbage, if you go up to somebody and you say hello to them and you introduce yourself in their local language, and how much is the price of bread or whatever, they really, really appreciate that. And that
hmm
goes a long way. And hey, let me introduce you to my friend, or, who knows what doorways open up. That could lead
exactly.
to you meeting somebody who through that network, you meet somebody else, and that leads to a
hmm
job, or
Exactly.
a
Yeah.
great
Now,
friendship, or a relationship with a significant other. Who knows,
yeah.
right? What
Now,
doorway that would open for you.
exactly. Now, mind you, saying that, I am able to use the minimum amount of Chinese I know,
Hmm.
and I can understand them, and I'll respond to them in Chinese sometimes too.
Oh, good.
I'll even try practicing and telling them a story, and surprisingly, they understand what I'm saying.
Okay.
Um,
Oh,
but
so
you know, so
it's
there's
better
times
than what you were letting on then if you're telling stories.
I would say at a scale of 1 to 10, I would say it's probably still a 3.
Okay.
I mean, but 10 is absolutely like you have no problem.
Yeah, yeah.
7, 8.
Native
I mean,
speaker.
8, 9, 10. You got, but I still don't even think I'm at an intermediate, not even close to an intermediate level.
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
still, even 6 years later, at a beginning level. That's why I say I'm a 3 at best.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, you know, understanding it, I'm understanding a lot more. If I listen, for example, I had ordered something the other night,
Uh-huh.
and I answered and I said, well, male fan, they don't have any rice. So,
Okay.
okay. I was trying to tell them that they don't have to give me anything else, but
Yeah.
she didn't understand that. She was a model. But I'm like, okay. So I basically said, okay.
Yeah.
And example, it's one word conversations. I get a package, Kwai D, and they say something else. They probably are saying they're downstairs, which they usually are.
Yeah.
But I can't repeat to you what they said in Chinese. I
Yeah.
just know
But
when
you
I hear
understand the
Kwai
word
D,
package. There's a package for you.
yeah. So
Yeah, I
I
mean
have
that's the start is learn the essential vocabulary.
exactly.
And then, I would argue later start learning some verbs of, that's important what the
You
action
know,
is. So learn a lot of subject vocabulary and then start learning some verb vocabulary. And once you're able to make very short little subject verb enunciations that people can understand, then you could start to think about, how the grammar works and learn more difficult.
yeah,
But at
yeah.
least you can
So
like talk like a caveman, to people, and they get
sure,
it. Like
I guess that's the way to put it. Yeah,
like
and
if it sounds like I thirsty, or want coffee, or whatever,
coffee
short
or
cavemanish talk. Like
you
that's
know,
all right, man. You can get a lot done with caveman language, in any
yeah.
language, and people really appreciate it.
So I'll gladly admit, yes, I'm lazy about that, and about the whole. I hate when people say, "If you come to America, you should speak English." No, if you come to America to work at a job that requires you to speak English, then you should speak English. There we go. I'll say that statement. Starbucks in America requires you to speak English.
Yeah,
You-
agreed. Uh,
So
Having
if the
said that,
job,
most people don't know that in the U.S. there is no official language. Did you know that?
I guess in a technicality, you're
No,
right.
there is no. When you fly into international airports, if you look closely, next time you fly in, there are
You get like
signs when
three or
you go
four,
through immigration that say
like
the
four
U.S.
language.
has no official language. English is not the
Enter.
official language of the U.S.
Huh.
Um, so
That is an interesting statement.
it
That's where
is.
the job will say you need to speak English, right?
English and
Or-
Spanish. You
Yeah,
almost
English
need
and
to know
Spanish.
Spanish to thrive in some areas of the U.S.
Yeah. So
And
that's
it's
the statement I'll
increasing.
say about that. Yeah. So, but the other thing is, now I'm not gonna diss English companies in China, but I do sometimes believe if, for example, maybe I'm no, maybe I'm being wrong about that. I was gonna say I think for some companies that cater to foreigners, those people should speak English. For example, the embassy, the Chinese workers at
Of
your
course, you
embassy,
have to. They're
they
they're helping
yeah, yeah.
American
Maybe
citizens do
that's a
important
bad
things.
example, but I'm saying like those kinds of places.
Yeah,
That's where I would say, hey, how come you're not speaking any English
yeah,
to
yeah,
me?
yeah, yeah. Agreed.
You're
Yeah.
working at a foreign at a embassy where
Or even an
um,
international school. Like if you walk to the front desk of an international
mhm.
school and you
They
are
should say,
trying to
"Good morning.
speak.
How can I help you?"
And why is that? Well, okay. Not everybody who is going to put their kid in an international school is going to be there long enough to learn the local language. Like you might be there on business for a year. And like, if you're an engineer working in China for a year, like you don't have time to learn the language. You're there for a very specific purpose. You're probably working very long hours,
Exactly.
and
You're gonna have a
you need to
translator right there.
sign
If
your
you're
kid up for school. You don't have time to like, figure that
oh,
out
there
in
you yeah,
Chinese.
exactly.
So
especially
yeah,
if it's an international school. They should not.
yeah, exactly.
I
No, if it's a
remember
local Chinese school, that's different. But we're talking
exactly
international school
international. Yeah.
where the curriculum is in English. Yeah, and there's a lot of
I
that doesn't happen. So look,
no,
we're
and it's
getting off
because
on this
they're
whole other tangent of English and language, which would be a great topic for another discussion. But I want to
yeah
bring it
yeah yeah
back to the pandemic, and we've already talked
sure
for about an hour. But let's, if you don't mind, let's sort of wrap this up on the topic of like,
sure
what can we do moving forward? What do you think we should do moving forward? Because there's a lot of of good examples and bad examples. Like in the US right now, cases are on the rise again, deaths are on the rise. The so the Some people are saying, well, the number of cases are going up because we're doing more testing. But what a lot of experts are saying is it's not only the number of cases that are going up, but it's the percentage of people who test that are testing positive. That's going up, right? So it used to be only 1 in 10. So meaning for every 10 people who tested, only one would test positive. That's what it was like for the last couple of months. But in the last few weeks, it's been 1 in 4. So it's gone up
wow
considerably, the number of people testing positive, right? So that's probably going to lead to, in the next 2 3 weeks and in the next month, uh, a much higher death rate as well. We can only wait to see, like in Florida and Texas and these states that are spiking again.
now getting into it yeah
Yeah.
that's
So
a
what do
good
you
million
think we
dollar
can do moving
question.
forward? What would, if you had advice for anybody? And look, guys, disclaimer here: none of us are doctors, but just based on like from what you've heard of smart people and what you've seen, like what are you doing, and what would you advise people to do?
To be honest, my advice is don't go out unless it's absolutely necessary. Like,
Mm,
yes, we all need fresh air, but we also need to live. And, taking care of ourselves and each other is more important than getting your beer at the local market, as an example,
yeah,
or
yeah,
getting your hair cut. There's certain things that are priorities in our life. And if you are going to go out, do the precautions, wear that mask. Who cares if they can't see your face?
yeah.
Like you're going to be fine.
Mm,
Wear a mask. It takes 2 minutes to go in and out of a store.
yeah,
You're good.
yeah.
Like
What are your
that's
thoughts on some places are making it mandatory for people to wear masks, and I have no problem with it being mandatory, like when you're in a shop or in the mall or in a crowd of people. But I don't wear a mask when I'm like going for a run outside, or if I, am in the hiking trails, outside my house a bit. When I know that I'm not going to be, I have my mask with me, in case I come up and if somebody wants to talk to me, I'll put my mask on. But generally outside or when I'm driving in my car, I don't wear a
I
mask.
I
What are your
think
thoughts on that?
I think there's no problem with that. I
Yeah,
think if you're not in contact with people
yeah,
and you're not being exposed to people around you, maybe if you're running in a big crowd, you'd wear a mask. But if
yeah,
you're
yeah,
out on your solo jog or you're
yeah.
hiking and there's no people around you, why would you wear a mask?
Agreed. Yeah,
Is a bear going to give you COVID or,
yeah.
a squirrel?
Are you going to give it
Like,
to a dog or
are you
something?
going to
Yeah,
give that to them?
yeah. So some states in the US, like in California, for example, I've heard of people that are walking on trails, like in state parks, and they're like miles into a trail, like nobody's around them. And a state park ranger will write them a ticket because they don't have a
What?
mask on, right?
My
Like it's
my family's been
mandated.
hiking. My unless it happened very recently. They've been hiking and they don't wear. I don't see. I see photos. They're not wearing a mask.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, maybe
So I
not. I'm
mean
sure a lot of people aren't, but in some places they're
that's
ticketing people.
ridiculous.
Yeah,
That's stupid. I would rip it up in front of them.
yeah.
Well, if a state trooper is coming up to you, put the mask on.
Yeah, yeah. There you go. Right.
What is the feet? What is the range of where the COVID can spread?
Well,
Like, is it
they say it's like 2 meters, but they also, I mean, we don't really know. They also say when you're outside, if you're in direct sunlight, the UV rays almost kill it. I mean, kill it almost instantaneously.
it
Uh,
almost seems like they don't have all they don't have all their facts to know anything, to be able to say anything. Because I swear I've heard like 50 different hypotheses about this. Like, well, the COVID's this, the COVID's that. They even said at one time their dogs could have it. And I think maybe this is a fake news thing, that people were killing their dogs because if their dogs had it, they would get it and it would spread. That was just, I'm just saying, I've heard like,
I haven't
but
heard that one yet. That's awesome.
maybe a fake news thing though.
Yeah, yeah. That's
It was
hilarious.
a, yeah, but they're like, no, your dogs can't catch it. Don't kill your dog. Like,
Oh my God.
I
And
swear,
there were
like,
probably some dummies that were killing their dogs. That's sad. Yeah.
yeah. But
Or
I
other
swear,
pets.
like, there's not one, there's not one straight answer. There's millions of doctors out, thousands of doctors coming up with different solutions, scientists, etc., dissolving what this COVID is,
Yeah.
2 meters, 3 meters, 1 meter,
And
a
there's not going
cough
to
of the
be,
sun.
this is the problem. People want the kind of answer that you can get in like 5 to 10 seconds, like something that can be on a meme, like a one sentence answer. That's the level of like how dumbed down communication is in
One
society
plus
now.
one is two.
Yeah, that's the kind of answer people want. They don't want any kind of nuance. They don't want the
Exactly.
answer where it's like, well, it depends. Are you outside? Is it a windy day? Are you standing in direct sunlight? Are like all of these things come into play, I think. Like, look, if you're in a bar that's crowded and nobody's wearing a mask versus are you at the beach that's crowded, but people are far enough away where you're not, and it's windy and it's bright
Yeah.
sunlight. Those are two very different situations. But I think in the US at least, the government, well, when I say the government, it's really only the state governments that have been active in this, right? Because the federal government, Trump did nothing, right? So there wasn't a federal response to this, and that's a big part of the problem. But the states who choose to impose these types of regulations, like lockdowns or use of mandatory masks, it's almost like, because I don't know what the percentage is, so I don't want to say most Americans, but at least enough Americans. I think we could agree on enough Americans are so stupid about wearing masks that the government has to treat everybody like a baby, right? So it's like, look, there's enough of you dummies out there who just won't wear a mask, so that we're going to have to make everybody wear a mask all the time and close everything down indefinitely. Like, that's what I think is the problem, right? But
Mhm.
instead, you've got people who are refusing to wear a mask and then are just being jerks. Like, have you seen the videos where people are going up and like like fake coughing on people's faces that are wearing a mask
That's just stupid.
and saying like it's a hoax, like don't buy into the, don't be a sheep, you're just a liberal dummy. We don't have to wear a mask, this kind of nonsense. uh it's like,
You
wow,
know,
what is wrong with you people, right? Like,
I,
if you
I
just
wonder their mental
put the mask
stability.
on, minor inconvenience like you said, and be responsible, everything could open up, and be like a lot more normal than it is now. I,
Yeah.
I don't get it, man. It's so stupid, right? Um,
The way that things were handled in the east part of the country, I don't know if people followed along the lines that China did. I don't know how Indonesia was, how quick they were to respond, or how quick South Korea
yeah, South
or
Korea was good. South Korea did quite good.
excuse me. Yeah, exactly. Like it seemed like the Eastern countries developed a very, as you said, authoritative way to, hey, this is what's happening. Please follow us. Thank you. Be safe.
Indonesia
Bada bing,
didn't do
bada boom.
any authoritarian thing at all. They at first they pretended it wasn't happening. The minister of health said it was a joke. This was back in January.
Oh God.
They hired people to post things on social media to pretend to be travelers, like people in Bali. They there were people who have come out, and I can share links with this of you.
That would be
Many
nice.
articles in like Jakarta Post about this, where they paid people a few $100s or something to post something on social media being like, look, come to Bali, come to Indonesia, it's beautiful, look at the beautiful beaches here, trying to counteract the the
The
paranoia,
scare.
right? Yeah, so they were like, and there were tens of thousands of Chinese people that were flying in, and even directly from Wuhan, you know, there in the beginning of this pandemic, right? And
Mhm.
they were saying for months there's zero cases, zero cases, zero cases. And finally, they were forced to at least acknowledge that all of the nonsense they were saying before, like sunlight, or we don't have it because it's hot, or you know, we don't have it because we pray a lot here, or choose your
Jeez.
nonsense topic that you want, right? Uh, they were finally forced to say, look, we it is a real thing, but they also publicly said, like they're not even trying to hide this, right? They've publicly said that we are not giving out the real number of cases or the real number of deaths because we don't want people to panic. Um, they recommended that some shops close, and they put the only thing that they enforced, right, was businesses that are more than 50 people at a time, and schools must be closed. So what that did was close down some restaurants that they could sell takeout, but they couldn't have in restaurant dining. The schools were closed and still are closed until at least January. Movie theaters are closed. Gyms were closed. But oddly, these giant department stores never
We're
closed.
open.
They were still open. And Indonesia is a predominantly Muslim country. And just after the Chinese Spring Festival, New Year's time, when there was the mass migration of people in China, and the world saw what happens when you allow people to migrate in a pandemic. Well, they allowed people to do that here for Ramadan. Everybody traveled around everywhere. The city that I live in is still considered a black zone. So it's beyond red zone. There are so many people dying at a rate so high here that it is considered a black zone. The government will not release the official numbers of people. If you look at the official numbers nationwide, the last time I looked, the official numbers nationwide are less than 3,000 deaths in China. I'm sorry, in Indonesia, less than 3,000.
But it's obvious that there's more, right?
Obvious. There are reporters who have done investigative reporting, and they've interviewed the grave diggers outside of Jakarta, Surabaya, the major
Hmm.
cities, and they have sent up drones with video of the new cemeteries that are only for COVID patients. And just
Wow.
outside Jakarta, the cemeteries there have more than 2,000 people buried there already. And this was like a month ago, you know, and this doesn't even include all the other cities. BBC, NPR, and an Australian, uh, I think it was News 9, I forget, an Australian news company, all have tried to interview the government here to get a straight answer. And they get the same answer, more or less, from the government that says, we're not releasing the real numbers. And when they press them a little bit to say, like, well, can you give me the real numbers? The government will say, I'm not going to just carelessly or release the numbers willy nilly. They'll use language like that. If you want the real numbers, if you're a good investigative reporter, you can go to every province in Indonesia and you can calculate the number yourselves.
That's
That's
funny.
what the government's doing here, right?
That's
Uh,
funny.
yeah, it is. Well, funny if it weren't like playing with
Funny
people's
in a
lives, because
yeah.
5 doctors have died in the city that I live in the last month alone, right?
Wow.
And this idea that it only affects old people is increasingly becoming uh, obviously not true. And I'll tell you this
Well, it's
latest
been
story.
that way for a while. Like and they say anyone can get it.
Yeah,
Babies,
no, but can die from it.
children.
This
Oh, die.
doctor got it. He was a doctor, right? So he was in contact with many sick people. And this is what you have to think about. Like, the hospitals here are overrun with patients, right? This is already happening here. They have to bring in like these mobile units to like test people and stuff because you can't even, get in a hospital. Um, a doctor brought it home. His wife contracted it. Their daughter got it, who was
Oh
pregnant.
no. Oh.
They all died. The father died, the wife died, the
Mm.
daughter who was pregnant died, and her young daughter, who was I think 5 or 6, young kid, like elementary school ages,
Oh.
died as well. Whole family took it
That's
out. Took out a
sad.
whole family. So this is like serious stuff. Um, what I wish governments would do around the world, what I wish they would do is not only give out real honest information and let people make their own decisions. If people knew, I think, the real numbers and it was transparent, I think everybody would just wear a mask if they need to go out, and they'd stay home if they needed to. And they'd make a responsible decision about opening up a business. And you wouldn't really need the government to enforceably do these things to people. That's what
But in
I
this
think.
world, we don't
That's what I
have
think.
common sense.
Well,
In this
not
world,
not not when you've got so much information going around, and not when you've got presidents like Donald Trump and other country presidents, like the guy in Brazil, the people here as well, who are saying stupid things like it's a hoax, and like when they're in public, they're not giving a good example. Like, look, a president needs to lead by example, right? Wear your fucking mask when you go out. Show people that it's cool to do that. Don't make it seem like, oh, I'm not, like, you can do it if you want, but I'm not going to do it. Like, what message does that send to people, right? Like, this is what causes all of these conspiracy theories to be thrown around to like
yep.
these easily persuaded people who will like read a meme on Facebook about, you know the virus being a way to like implant nanotech trackers or some nonsense bullshit like this, and this is what people are believing because there's not enough transparent data, and the government in the beginning saying you don't need a mask and then you do need a mask, and then later they finally came out and said, look, in the beginning we were saying you didn't need one because honestly there wasn't enough PPE for doctors, so we were trying to save it for them, blah blah blah. But what you don't hear a lot of are people talking about how to just like boost your immune system and stay healthy, like, you know, eating healthy food, taking supplements, getting sunshine, like taking a walk. Like, the gyms are closed, like run up and down your stairs, or go for a run outside, or just do some jumping jacks or push ups in your apartment, if you're really, really afraid to go out. Don't just sit around and be a lazy sack of shit and play video games all day and eat, takeout pizza. Like, that's the worst thing you can do for your immune system, so that if you do come into contact with it, and
Yeah.
and let's face it, man, like everybody is probably going to come into contact with this eventually, right? Like, it might not be today or tomorrow or next week, but like they're probably not going to come up with a vaccine for this anytime soon. So like it might not be until say this time next year you might get it. So it's
Yeah.
very important that you stay healthy and you have a strong immune system so that when you do get it, because I don't think it's a question of if, I think it's a question of when.
When
When you do get it, your immune system can fight it off, right?
exactly? There was something. Oh gosh, what's his name? The foul mouth comedian. He's very famous. Uh, he
Richard,
throws a he.
like common
Say
now,
again.
like a guy now, or really
No, dead now. He was
dead?
really famous. He cursed a
Gal,
lot. No, who?
not Gallagher or who?
No, no. Gallagher was a watermelon guy, wasn't
Sam
he?
Kinison? Oh yeah, he was a
No,
Smashwater.
not Kimberson. No.
Black or white?
Bearded guy, bearded white, bearded guy. It will come into me.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Anyway, yeah.
he had a bit about the whole scare of getting the virus and stuff. And he basically had a bit about it, saying that everyone's gonna get it. Everyone needs to fight it off. Stop being an F and P, and just deal with it. But my gosh, he's very famous. It's gonna kill me. I'm not gonna dwell on it, but
I heard somebody
bearded
talk
guy.
about a comedian who died recently. That's probably
No,
who
no, no.
you're
It was
talking
a
about.
while ago. He's an
Oh,
old comedian. Maybe he passed away 15, 20 years ago.
then
But
how
he
was
was
he
very
talking
famous.
about the pandemic and everybody going to
No,
get
no,
it
no,
anyway?
not this pandemic. He was talking about being sick in general. He had a spiel
Oh,
about being
yeah.
sick
Okay,
in
okay, okay.
general,
But it just applies
and
to this.
it was it will come into me. But yeah. So he basically was saying, everyone's going to get sick one way or another, and just to basically fight it off and deal with it.
Yeah, so that idea of herd immunity, right? Basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And
Uh,
that's a good
George
argument
Carlin.
up to
George
George Carlin.
Carlin.
Yeah,
Carlin.
yeah, George
He
Carlin,
he
right.
he
Yeah.
had a bit about being sick.
Okay, George
He had a bit about
Carlin,
being.
right.
Yeah, he had a
Yeah.
little.
Um
Yeah,
that idea of herd immunity makes sense if it's not such a fast spreading virus or disease that isn't so disruptive to the system. Like the problem with this disease, and on many cases, I agree, it's just another flu. And yeah, fair enough. It kind of is just another flu in a way, but the common flu does not make so many people sick all at the same time so quickly. You know,
yeah.
if it did, then every flu season around the world, people would have to be transforming their basketball stadiums into temporary flu centers, and that just isn't the case, right? Like, so clearly, this is faster spreading, and
Yeah.
people get hospitalized very quickly all at the same time, which overwhelms the medical system, and that's really the problem, isn't it? Right? You can't have your medical system so overwhelmed that look, if I'm in a car wreck right now and I break my leg, or if my wife were pregnant and we're having a baby, like the worst fucking place to be in the world right now would be a hospital, right? Like they're all full of COVID patients, right? They're
Mhm. Yeah.
overwhelmed. So you don't want to be going to a hospital right now. And even if you had to, it's overwhelmed. The hospitals are full, so you might not be seen and you might not get the treatment that you need for a completely unrelated thing. And that's really uh, what the big issue is, right? Like, not about whether or not it's just another flu, or whether or not it was intentionally released from China, or whether or not blah, blah, blah. Like,
Yeah. The
you
bottom
know,
line is that we need to deal with this and come together as a world, not as an individual, and come together to clean this up and get along, stop blaming each other, and just get better.
yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
know, there's a whole hypocrisy about whether it was intentionally spreaded or whether there was reports that came where it didn't come from China, that it was actually people from who were stationed in China
yeah,
had it, and there was, I mean, there's hundreds of stories,
yeah,
and the bottom line is it doesn't matter what the story is. The bottom line is that it is happening, and
yeah,
rather
right.
than dwell about the past, about what's happening is what we need to do to resolve it. As we've been discussing, is
Yeah.
short and sweet. Wear a mask. Don't go out unless you have to, and everything will fine tune itself.
Yeah.
That's
So I agreed. Like the number one thing you can do right now is wear a mask, right?
yeah,
Yeah, that's the number one thing you can do. When you go out, wear a mask. That's it. Whether you're sick or you
exactly,
think you're sick or not, wear a fucking mask, right? It's really simple. Like just do it,
exactly.
and all of that other stuff can get sorted out later. Like I actually think it is kind of important to investigate how did this happen, because
I agree.
if it turns out, and let's hope it doesn't, because that would lead to like a war or something. Let's hope it doesn't turn out to be like a intentional biological weapon that was leaked out, that somebody intentionally set out. I don't think that's the case at
It
all.
can't be,
But I
especially with
do
the
think, based on the,
there's
I
more
think,
to
let
the
me
story.
say, forget about what I think. There's a lot of evidence. Let's put it that way. There's a lot of evidence that points to it leaking out of a laboratory accidentally. And I think if that is the case, it needs to be addressed, right? Because uh, there's a reason why a lot of this experimentation on viruses is illegal in some countries in the world, like what they call gain of function, where you like,
Mhm.
you take a virus, like for example, coronavirus, you find it in bats in a cave somewhere far away, and you find, oh, this is a new virus we don't know about. It's not yet able to jump from bats to humans. Let's take it and put it in a lab, and let's help it along on its evolution. So it's not really like a created in a lab. It's a naturally occurring thing in the environment, but they help it along on its evolution. So they think, what would happen if it does jump from bats to pigs or bats to humans? And so they help it do that. And then they think, okay, well, what would happen if it became airborne? And so they help it along to do that. And the argument for this is, if it does happen naturally that way, then we've already sort of artificially in a lab helped speed up the evolution so we can create a vaccine for it if it does happen. Well, the obvious counter argument to that is, well, if that is in fact what happened, where is this vaccine? Why haven't you come up with a vaccine? Like, you guys are in laboratories playing with these very deadly viruses all the time, and and when they do leak out, you don't have an answer. Like, that's a problem. And uh and it may or may not have happened this time, but there's a lot of evidence to point to it happening, and it has
Yeah,
happened before several times. There's precedence for this. It's happened several times in the past, right?
yeah.
So a
Bill
lot
Maher
of
did a
people,
thing.
yeah, a lot of people are arguing to stop altogether what they call gain of function uh,
Yeah,
testing, which is that where you take a virus and you help it evolve quickly. Um,
yeah,
and I think there might be some truth to that. I don't know. It definitely needs to be
yeah,
addressed, though.
yeah. Hopefully soon. My prediction is my hope is I can go visit my family during Christmas, but the reality is I don't think so. Although my principal
Yeah.
seems to be optimistic about it, like, yeah, I should open up, but I think she's just trying to be nice and supportive and hopeful with me.
You
But
mean you mean visit them and be able to come back to,
yeah,
yeah, because you could go visit them right now, probably. You just wouldn't be able to get back to China, or you wouldn't be able to get back
uh,
to almost any Southeast Asian country.
I think you're correct. I think you are indeed correct. I think that regardless of the visa, unless you're married, you would not be able to come back. Now, I haven't heard stories of being refused, or I haven't don't know about marriage visas, but
We're just
I
talking about
believe,
you right now. You're an
yeah,
American
me.
citizen.
No, I wouldn't be able to come back. No.
You can
Um,
fly back to the US right now to visit your family. You just wouldn't be able to go back to China, probably.
correct,
Yeah,
correct.
all right.
Yeah.
So I'm in the
Actually, I
same
think the
situation.
flights
I
are
was
limited. Yeah.
supposed to go back for the 4th of July. I had planned that like months and months ago, almost a year ago now, and that those plans got canceled. And
Yeah.
now I could fly back. There are a few flights back, but I wouldn't be allowed back into Indonesia. I'd be stuck back in US again. So
Yeah, so the obvious route is just wait till um it opens, I guess, you know. My
and do you
prediction,
really even want to fly right now? Do you want to be on a plane
no,
with a bunch of
it's
other
too
people?
expensive. It's too
Oh,
expensive.
forget,
And
even if somebody bought you a ticket, do you really want to be on a plane right now
no,
in the
I
middle of a
wouldn't be able to
global
come back.
pandemic?
Yeah, I wouldn't. No.
I wouldn't.
My prediction, this is my unrealistic, undoctor, unprofessional prediction, is
Yeah.
I think they'll that places will open up come the Chinese New Year.
Hmm.
So early
There'll
next
be a
year.
lot of pressure by people to do that, you know?
I really think that by then, because we're in the month of July, so August, September, October, November, December, January, February. That's 7 months. I think that's, and it had been a year. So I think that would be year to date. So that's my prediction with no facts to support what I'm saying, other than I think a year's a long enough time to
Yeah.
find some kind of solution, whether
Yeah.
it be a vaccine, a cure, a solution. So
A
I
cure
think,
is a
and
stretch. Like we've never in the history come up with a cure for a virus, so I don't see that happening.
maybe not a
The
cure, maybe
best we can hope for is a
a shot to,
vaccine.
yeah, vaccine.
And vaccines typically take anywhere from 2 to 4 years to develop. So um, the only way that, from what I've been reading in scientific journals and stuff, the only way that we're going to come up with something that'll be quote unquote a cure-ish type thing would be like if there's an existing drug already out there that's already been mass produced for something else, like say, I don't know, maybe a drug for diabetes, or they've been talking about malaria drugs or whatever. If there's a drug out there that already exists and they're currently in trials, human trials for it right now, and they find that it is effective somehow, that
Hmm.
might happen in within 2020/2021. But otherwise, a proper vaccine, I would. I'm not keeping my fingers crossed for that in the next year. I don't see that
Yeah.
happening.
And I had a question for you, and whether
Okay.
you want to pause and make this off the record or not. I wanted to know about your story about getting the COVID. And again, you
Oh
can
yeah,
delete this.
that's relevant, right?
Okay,
So
yeah,
I got sick about when was it? It's been
a
over a
couple
month
months,
now. It's been over a
two
month,
months, I
two
think.
months maybe. Um, and it was after the pan. It was after the pandemic had already started. But as I told you, here in Indonesia, things got started a bit late. So like, um, there wasn't any kind of lockdown or anything. Like stuff was still normal, quote unquote normal in Indonesia. Like there was definitely news about coronavirus, and people were starting to get a little bit scared, and like smart people were starting to question the government saying there's zero cases here. And there was, unfortunately, people starting to be a little bit racist against Chinese people, right? So because they didn't know, they knew that many people had come from China, so people were sort of like you would see people
Yeah,
distancing themselves from China. So that's the backdrop of it, right? And I had kind of started to wear a mask, but I wasn't taking it too seriously at that point. I was thinking like, oh, this is all hype, like it's just media hype, like it's just another flu. Every year we get the flu. The flu kills, almost 1 million people every year. Like, and we don't close everything down for the flu. I don't go around wearing a mask. Like, if you get it, you get it, and you get over it. That was sort of my mentality at the beginning of this.
mhm,
And I got something. And I think it probably was COVID because I had at the beginning, uh, like things smelled weird. Like I was always like, what is that smell? What is that weird smell? Why does that smell? Things didn't smell like what they were supposed to smell like, right? And stuff started tasting funny. And at that time, I didn't even know that that was one of the symptoms, right? I just thought like,
I didn't even know that either. So if you smell something funny or taste something funny, that's part of the
yeah, that's
symptoms.
one of the symptoms.
Interesting.
Is it messes with your taste and your smell. And some people, that's all they get. That's the only symptom they get. Like things taste a bit off, like food that you liked to eat before tastes different, you know. um, and I think there's a broad scale of like some people, I read somewhere that some people were saying even things that taste sweet usually taste sour or things like that. I just
Hmm.
noticed stuff tasted a bit off, you know, like food tasted extra salty and things tasted smelled bad, or I don't know, it was just weird. I can't, it wasn't any one thing. It wasn't like, oh, everything smells like flowers or everything smells like shit. It wasn't. It was just different. And I can't put a, you know, I can't button it down to any one thing, but it was noticeably different. um and I just didn't think too much about it. You know, I thought, I don't know, just, I don't know, maybe
Weird.
allergies or something, you know what I mean? uh,
Hmm.
I continued going to the gym, swimming, doing my normal thing, you know, teaching online classes like I was doing, going shopping every whenever I wanted. Um, and then I got like I started coughing, sneezing, getting a bit congested, having quote unquote like flu-like symptoms. And so
Hmm.
I you know, just self-medicated with warm tea and, you know, whatever, just rested a bit. And then I got really sick. I started getting like headaches and like my body ached all over, like really bad. Like, you know, like I felt like, I don't know, I fell down a flight of stairs or something. Like it just hurt to move. Like my neck hurt, my shoulders hurt, like all the muscles in my body just ached constantly, you know, like really bad. And I was getting sick. I was vomiting. Like I had stomach problems. My vision was blurry. I couldn't sleep well. I was sweating a lot. I had a fever, and this went on for like those bad, really bad symptoms like that went on for about a week. You know, to where I was just like, oh, like awful feeling. You know, like where I couldn't eat. Like I had to force myself to drink water and just, you know,
Hmm.
eat a little bit of food because I couldn't even keep it down. And so I was weak, you know, from not eating. Uh, it was bad. Like it was really bad. And I didn't go to a hospital. I was just like, it's just a normal flu. My wife started asking me about, you know, maybe you should go to a hospital. What if you have COVID? And I was like, well, at that time they were still calling it coronavirus. You maybe you have coronavirus. And I was like, well, if I do, I don't want to go to the hospital because I might get other people sick. And if I don't, you know,
I can get it.
I might get it from somebody else. And anyway, either way, like, what are they gonna do for me anyway? Like, I'm just gonna lay in a bed there anyway. Better I lay it in bed here. I've got my movies I can watch. I
Makes
can,
logical sense to
you know,
me.
I can take a shower. There's no need for me to go to a hospital. Like, they're just gonna probably cost me
Tell you
money.
to
You
lay
know?
down and rest.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
know.
So I was like,
Um,
look, if you come home and you find me like unresponsive, you know, like then call an ambulance and send me to the hospital. But otherwise, nah, I'm gonna pass, you know. And little by little, like very slowly, I started getting better. But it was real slow. You know what I mean? Like little by little, I stopped sweating. I think that was the first symptom that went away. Was my fever broke. And then little by little, my body pain started going down. But I mean, it
mhm.
was slow. It took like almost a month. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't feel good for about a month. And there were a few times where I would get better, and then boom, it'd just hit me again, like come back, like it'd be
Really
really, really bad. But then it wouldn't last very long. It'd come back, and I'd get back to that level of like just being kind of achy, but not, you know what I mean? So it was a
Mhm.
curve like this. I'd get better, and then boom,
Weird.
and then better, and then boom, and then better, and then boom, and better, and boom, you know?
How long did it take you to get better?
About over a month. And even after that month, like I was still experiencing this sensation of like, say, like all better, like all symptoms better. but
Yeah.
it felt like somebody was pressing on my chest,
Hmm.
like
Did your
chest
wife
pressure.
ever? Did your wife ever experience any of those symptoms?
Uh, yeah, she got sick before me for about 2 weeks,
Interesting.
and
So she didn't catch what you had for that month, or
good question. No, no. About 2 weeks later, after she got sick, I got sick. But her symptoms were very mild. She stayed home from work for about 3 days, and then she went
okay.
back to work after that. And she wears a mask a lot, all the time, anyway. So
Hmm.
um, I doubt anybody from her work is watching this, but I could, so otherwise I wouldn't say. But they found over 20 people tested positive at her workplace for COVID
Wow.
after that. After she was sick, after I was sick. This is much more recently. 20
Mm.
people. And all
Wow.
of them were asymptomatic. None of them had symptoms. They were all shocked. Like, what? I don't have a fever. They checked their fever, no fever. No sneezing, nothing.
That's crazy. So what do you do if you don't have if what do you do if you have it but you don't have any symptoms?
You
Rest
fucking
for
stay
2 weeks?
home because you can spread it to everybody else.
Yeah.
That's the
That's what
problem. This is the big
that's
problem. That's what I'm saying is, why are we doing this temperature check thing? Like, if you really care about it, you've got to do testing for everybody. And then you let the people who don't have it go back to work. And you get people
yeah.
to test like every 2 weeks, just mandatory testing every 2 weeks for everybody. And the
Well,
government's got to take the bill for that. The government's got to eat that, They just
yeah.
have to.
Well, here's the ironic thing is that, well, I guess technically it was 2 weeks later. I had tested on the 16th and it was negative of
Uh-huh.
June, right?
Yeah.
And then I had the fever. It cool. Now here's the thing: is now that you mentioned asymptomatic, maybe I don't think I have it, but because your symptoms are completely opposite to the people who had it at your wife's work, no signs at all, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
So
yeah.
like, but the fact is, what I feel I'm describing is really just a cold, sinuses. The
Yeah.
season's changing. It seems like when I weigh out those options, hopefully parents of my school aren't watching this and they go, "What?" Because I'm on family business, but it's China, so parents aren't going to watch YouTube and go, "Oh, Teacher Grant, what's this about?" They're not going to listen to
Anyway,
this
yeah.
English. Anyways, my point being is that when I weigh out the options and go, okay, cold, COVID. I go, okay, small fever. Okay, COVID. Cool down in 5 hours. Cold, fever. No headache. No pain. No aches. No weird smell. No weird taste. No anything else on that list. If you want me to be nitpicky, if I'm going to nitpick my body, I had a simple of a headache, but it's due to the heat. A simple, like it was like if you tapped me on the back very lightly. That's the feeling I had for my head for like those 2 hours or whatever it was. So those were my symptoms. And
And so
but what
based
you,
on that, you're making the assumption that you don't have COVID. That's the point of
of
what you're saying.
course, yeah,
Okay.
that's my point.
So here's the problem with that. Here's the problem with that is there are anywhere from no symptoms at all to like, I feel
Hmm.
great. I don't have a fever. I'm not sneezing and coughing. Like all that group of people that are
Hmm.
positive that can spread it, right? Even
And
though
then
they
make
don't
it
have
worse
symptoms.
for others. Yeah.
Yeah, there's from that all the way, pick any symptom you want: aches and pains, smelling, fever, lack of appetite, blurry vision, sniffles, almost any symptom you want, all the way up to like death. And even some people are like getting body parts amputated because it's caused blood clots, right? There was that Broadway actor who just died a couple of days ago, and he got his fucking leg amputated before he died because of COVID related blood clots. And then there's all of the lung problems. The
Mhm.
NBA players are getting x-rayed and like they don't have any symptoms, but they take an X-ray of their lung, and it shows. They say it looks like broken glass inside their lungs,
Hmm.
and they don't know what long-term effects that's going to have, right? So the point is, Grant, you do not know if
Yeah,
it's
until
COVID or not unless you get tested for it, right? That's the
I'll know in
only
two
way you
hours.
know. And
Or
like,
no, oh yeah,
and right now, the way that the world is, you just have to act like you are positive and everybody that you know is positive. And what does that mean? It means you wear a mask, right? That's it. Simple. Doesn't mean, everybody has to be paranoid and lock themselves in their apartment and
yeah,
pretend it's like, the Walking Dead and the world is ending.
exactly, yeah.
But it does mean that you need to wash your hands with hand sanitizer a lot, you know, wear a
Oh,
mask everywhere you go, uh, you know, distance yourselves from people. And it's probably a really bad idea to go to a bar and drink right now. That's a bad
yeah.
idea. Like, if you want
Um,
to have a drink with friends, do it at a table where you're far away from everybody else, preferably outside. Like, don't gamble with it. So
yeah, and even as what's the word, as perky as China wants to make themselves to be, like, oh, we're number one, we finished first. There's gonna be a new wave. It's gonna happen in another month or
already
so.
started happening, I heard, in
I think in
where
Beijing there was a couple
Beijing
of
or
cases.
somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Um,
let's face it, man, I don't care what anybody says or what China says. The numbers there, that's not true. There is no way that they shut down an entire city over 100 cases. And there's no way that in a country of 2 billion people with a widespread pandemic like that only 3,000 people died. There's just no way, man. The numbers have
uh,
got to be astronomically higher than that.
yeah, yeah. I agree. Yeah, definitely.
So,
Uh,
we'll never know. But
yeah,
the point is, wear your mask,
yeah,
like, everybody who gets bogged down in these conspiracy theories, like, the point is, like, wear a mask,
yeah,
except for the people who are saying it's a hoax, or it's just a normal flu. Like, look,
yeah.
man, look at the hospitals right now. The normal flu does not fill the emergency rooms
Exactly.
like
Yeah.
that.
I'll know my results in an hour and a half, which is a good thing. I kind of do have a slight like panic in my head, like talking about how I'm feeling, even though I was negative on the 16th. I still have this like, what if? Oh my gosh, what if? What if?
What if it is
You know?
positive?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I hear you on that. Not because of even the health issues, but just because of, like, the social stigma attached to it right now.
Yep. Because now they want to just blame Americans, even though I haven't gone anywhere. I've been in Shanghai. I didn't
That's
travel.
stupid. Like, it's clearly like an international, but, like, the U.S. had its hand in this Wuhan lab. But look, let's face it, it started in China. You know what I mean? It was, at the very least, it was like, uh, it was ineptitude, or not very good quality standards, or what. Like, it either leaked out of a lab, or if you want to believe the story of the wet market, which I don't believe, however way you want to slice it, it started in China, right? And
Yeah.
as do most flus that infect the rest of the world. You know what I mean? Like,
They've
MERS
started in
came from
China.
China,
There was the
SARS came from
Wuhan,
China, like, the back in the
the
60s, the
Wuhan
Hong Kong flu, like, all of that stuff comes from China. So China really needs to, like, think about, why is
how
that?
to wash their hands.
Yeah, maybe, like, stop peeing in the street, and stop, stop spitting food everywhere. Like, get, up your hygiene game a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe. But yeah, about that social stigma, like, what do you think would happen if it came back that you were positive? Would your school just
Well,
can you,
I, I,
or they'd give you like 2 weeks,
legally
or
speaking, I don't know what they would do if that happened. I don't know the legality. I know there's laws that I think they state they can't can you for that. Because I'm still
yeah,
under contract.
if you're
Now they wouldn't
Chinese,
hire
but
me
as a Westerner, they could probably do
as
just
a
about
West.
anything they want.
Well, yes and no. There's still some. I would guess that I don't know. I'll find out in an hour and a half. But I
Well, I
guess
hope
in
it
the
works out fine. I
yeah.
know that there's a lot of weird things that are happening. I just read in the newspaper yesterday that anyone who has tested positive for COVID at any time, so I'm not talking about actively being positive. I'm talking about if you have had a positive test result, you can
Mhm.
no longer enroll in the US military. Think about that. Yeah.
Interesting.
And
Wow.
here's how weird it is. If you go into the process, you go to sign up, and they send you in and you do your physical. Of course, they're doing COVID testing. And if you test positive at that time, they tell you come back in 2 weeks after you have cleared up. And then after that 2 weeks, when you come back and they say now you're negative, they say, oops, but you have tested positive in the past, so you are disqualified.
So they just waste your time.
Just
Come
waste
back.
your time. Yeah. So people are complaining about that, and
Jeez.
they're like, "What are we going to do
What?
about this?" Because like, if everybody ends up getting it,
Who are
and
they
what
going to
are they going
accept
to
in the
do?
army?
Like kick people out of the military who have had it? Because obviously there've got to be some military people that are getting it as well.
Goodness gracious.
So yeah,
Well,
imagine what schools and other businesses are going to do to like stigmatize it. It's going to be
mm,
interesting to see how that gets
yeah.
dealt with moving forward.
Another thing too, and I don't know about you. You said you weren't really wearing a mask. Not that saying
Now I
I
do. In the
haven't.
beginning, early on, I wear a
Um.
mask everywhere I
So
go now. In the
yeah. Now
beginning,
what
I
I'm
wasn't.
saying now is in the past. Well, let's see. If I'm being hypothetical, not hypothetical. If I'm being technical, I did go out. There's three of us in that area. My two friends and myself.
Uh huh.
Then another couple came in, five, and then the bartender, there's two staff. I went home late that night, felt fine. And again, like you said, actually, there were a couple times when I was lazy and didn't have the mask. Left the school in a hurry, so I didn't take the mask out. But I'm
Yeah.
literally walking distance to my house, like a
Oh yeah.
block away.
But you were walking outside though.
Yeah, I know.
Well, I think
So
that's okay. Like, I think that's all right.
yeah, me too. But like as far as crowds go, I don't
Yeah.
go to where crowds are. I mean,
Yeah. So you're
technically, I would.
probably good. What
I
about when
know.
you're at school? When you're teaching at school, you have a mask on constantly, right?
No, no, they don't have anyone wear a mask at the school because it's too hot for them.
Well,
And
that's
well,
stupid.
how, how would you teach English with a mask on?
Well, like this, like, okay, class, good morning. Like, you know what I mean?
It
Like,
would say apple,
no, come on.
apple.
You can hear that. You can say
No, I'm talking
apple, apple,
what I
right?
mean, but with the children when they want to
How do you
see the
teach
lip
English
syncing.
if everybody's sick and at home with the flu? That's
Yeah,
the obvious counter argument to that, right? Like,
yeah.
if you got it, then you probably got it from school. Whatever you got,
That's
whether it's a
actually what I
flu.
was kind of sarcastically thinking. They're gonna like look at me like, "Where have you been?" It's like, "I've been at
I've been
work."
at
So who gave
school,
you?
right? I mean,
I mean,
schools are notoriously germ factories, right? Like kids are
yeah.
dirty. Like they
So
don't wash their
so so
hands.
so like the how do I guess we're lightly cursing here. So the asshole in me wants to say who the f gave me the effing flu, who
Yeah.
the f gave me COVID.
Well, for
I've
sure
been
it was
fine at
like it's
home.
spreading around at your school, right?
Like
That's
I
where
want to like look at them
flu
in the
goes.
face and say, hey, I've been at home for 4 months,
Yeah.
no symptoms. I don't go out. I
Yeah.
come to school. I get a fever. Who the f gave me COVID? It's you, not me.
Will
Don't
Are
even.
you forbidden from wearing a mask at school?
No, no. I have a mask,
So wear
but
it.
I don't wear. Yeah, sure. I guess I got mine.
I mean, that's
Uh,
that's doubly stupid on my opinion. Sorry, but like it's silly on the part of the school to not have a mandatory mask policy in place for the children who are in close proximity to each other, and it's just
yeah.
foolish on your part for not doing it as a
And it's so
teacher
funny
being in
when they
contact with them
space them out. Typically in Eastern schools, they like your best
right up
friends,
beside
best
each other.
buddies.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But and in the states, you know how far the chairs are. They're about a foot apart, right?
Yeah, or more. Yeah.
So like it's funny how they say 6 feet apart. So like they're literally like you know, well,
2 meters. Yeah.
Yeah, but barely no, like this far. Instead of like being close together, they're
Uh-huh.
like this far. Not even that far. It's like,
Oh, so that's not
really?
even 1 foot, much less 6 feet.
No, it's barely a foot. It's like,
So they're doing
really?
that and they're not wearing masks. So it's like, all right, well, get ready to get sick,
They're
everybody.
born to get this, and I wonder, like, they were qualified by the Education Bureau. They got all through the training, blah blah blah. Yes, you're good, but the way I see it, I'm like, really? Okay, my friend works at a kindergarten. He gets his
Mhm.
temperature taken 3 times a day.
Wow.
The children at my school get their temperature taken 3 times a day. The staff do not. I mentioned this to the one of the bosses, or what, I don't know what title. She's the boss of the Chinese teachers, and she's in charge of the curriculum that we do for the foreigners.
Yeah.
As I was mentioning to her, I was like, "Well, why don't you test the staff 3 times a day? It takes literally 5 seconds to go ding, you know,
Yeah, but
like
we all know that that's bullshit anyway. Like
yeah,
the number of people who are asymptomatic is higher than the people who have symptoms, right? So like you could have say 30 kids in a classroom, 10 of them could be sick and you don't know it at all, and they're just spreading it around to all the other kids, and then they're spreading it to you, and
yeah,
you might also be asymptomatic and you're spreading it to somebody else. Eventually, out of those 30, 40 people that it spreads everywhere else, a few people are going to get
but
it that it affects very badly and kills. This is the
yeah,
problem.
where's the funding to give everybody the test 2 weeks every 2 weeks?
Where's the
You know,
funding? From the government. The government's got money. The government can just print out money when they want to bail out a bank. They can come up with 3 trillion, $4 trillion. They can't come up with a few $1 million to test people. Come on.
yeah, but
Ridiculous.
yeah, it's true. It would seem, it would seem like, yeah, actually, you make a good point. Like, for the time being, for at least the next to the end of the year, they should be testing people at work, wherever the work is,
Yeah.
or for families who aren't working to get
At a
tested
minimum
every two
every
weeks.
2 weeks.
Yeah,
Ideally, it would
because
be weekly. You do a weekly quick test. Every week, do a quick test. Just a swab
yeah,
that you can do on site. You don't have to send it into a lab. It's like the quick on site quick test. Do that weekly, and then people who test positive, just make them stay home for 2 weeks. That's the solution. That's how you open up the world. That's how
yeah,
flights are happening. One of the airlines is doing that. Mandatory quick test. They do it for free. The airline themselves, before you get on the plane, they do a quick test for everybody. If you're negative, welcome to blah 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 airlines. Enjoy your flight.
how do
Here's your
they do a test that quick? How do they do
It's
a
like a
swab
2 hour
test?
test. You've got to show up at the airport when you go through security. You show up and you do the quick test. You know,
And so before you board, they know whether or not you're positive or negative, I'm
yes,
assuming.
that's right.
Huh?
Yeah.
Oh,
And that's what they
that's
should be doing at schools, right? If an
yeah,
airline can do that on themselves, are you telling me the government can't afford to like do that for schools? Come on.
yeah. But we're
And
talking
like
about other countries, whether they got to do that for foreigners and stuff like that, like Indonesia,
just
China.
schools, do it for schools. Every government should be doing it for themselves. Look, the obvious downside is, look, the all these places are shut down. This is a horrible drain on the economy. So
Yeah.
look,
We
however
need
you
to get
slice it, the
back up.
government's got to take a hit, right? With money. So how do you want to do that? You want to do it on the back end by paying people millions and millions, or billions or trillions, however much money, in unemployment, in creating all these like new back to work programs, all these hiring lots of people and setting up all kinds of infrastructure to spray disinfectant and all this stuff everywhere?
Yeah.
Or do you want to do it on the front end and test people and get
Every
sort of
week.
nip it in the bud? I would think that would be cheaper, in the long run. That'd be
Hmm.
cheaper to like prevent it from
Yeah.
spreading in the first place, and it
But
wouldn't
I think some have
impact
their
people's
egos
lives so much.
intact. Yeah.
Yeah.
But some countries have their egos intact. Like,
Oh
no,
yeah.
we don't need a test.
Yeah, like
We've
Brazil.
already closed
Brazil.
down, and
Yeah,
there
look
you
at
go.
Brazil.
Yeah. We've talked an awful lot.
We've done 2.5 hours. I think we should cut it right here.
I am agreeing.
So thank you so much, Grant. There's a lot to talk about in the world right now. So
Definitely. We can
um,
probably piece this together in sections.
I'm just gonna post it all
Oh,
in one thing
perfect.
on YouTube, and
Nice.
then I'll post the YouTube video on Web Talk,
Perfect.
and then I'll
With your
I'll put
permission
some
as well,
questions in
I
the.
would love to double down with you and post it as well. Like, we'll post it on both channels and we'll share each other if that's cool with you as well. Or if this is your thing, that's fine as well.
Do you want
I'm
to
neutral.
share the link from my YouTube like that, or you want to share a separate video?
I was gonna. Well, I can definitely share. But well, I was gonna also, with your permission and collaboration, post the video as raw. I was gonna. Were you gonna edit it out, or were you gonna do chunks and stuff, or were you just gonna post it
Let's
raw?
pause it right now, all right? And we'll talk about this. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. Maybe we'll do this again sometime. Answer the comments in the answer the multiple choice questions if you got to the end of this in the comments
Comments
section.
below.
All right. Peace.